A little boy cries, clinging tightly to a dark-haired woman. She is his mother and tries in every way to calm the baby down, while he, choking with tears, calls for his grandmother. The old woman lies peacefully with her eyes closed. She has long been in a better world and in complete peace, probably enjoying her stay there. The rest of the people in the hall are called to say goodbye to the deceased. The crowd of people seem to be in complete darkness. The sun is shining clearly outside, but their sadness darkens all possible colors around. Some cry, and from this you can hear light sobs and the sounds of falling tears everywhere, which like pure grief break on the tiles. The baby, finally breaking away, carefully pulls his mother's skirt, trying to attract her attention to his person. The only question that comes out of his mouth is that it seems to him that his grandmother has gone to heaven. He doesn't know if it's true, but anything is possible. The lady, trying not to cry in front of her son so as not to show herself weak, tries to swallow sadness and smiles easily. Granny retired to a beautiful place, and it was meant to be. The girl is sure that the deceased will watch Min-jun and the whole happy family from there. The guy doesn't stop asking questions. The only thing that interests him at this age is treats. The most interesting thing is whether there is something in that place that he would like to see. The lady smoothly squats down and gently hugs her son. She assures that there is everything that the old lady likes. Uncontrollable tears flow down your face on their own. The hand rests on the baby's head, trying to subconsciously calm the child, knowing that it will be better this way. They should see Grandma off with a smile on her face. This is something she would definitely like to see. Someone's hand falls on the bed and begins to intensively shake the feather bed. There is complete silence in the room, but everything ends very quickly. The owner of a female voice begins to say that it is time for her interlocutor to get up. The girl doesn't understand who is looking for her grandmother so desperately. It might be her granddaughter Sion, but she needs to open her eyes to understand what's going on. Only the outlines of an incomprehensible girl are visible, who continues to talk about an important day and about some viscount. Fully open eyes show reality. There is a lady in a maid's uniform standing right next to the bed. An angry facial expression makes it clear that something is already going wrong. Granny doesn't know this person at all, and this is clearly not her granddaughter. Not even a second passes before the dark-haired woman turns from dissatisfied remarks to a sharp cry accusing the girl of sleeping like a groundhog. This is indeed true, and sometimes it is difficult to wake her up, but the name Hami, which she is called by, is completely unclear. It seems that the interlocutor is increasingly running out of patience. How is it possible not to get up for so long when you have to go to work? She says the irritation will not subside in her words, which is truly worrying. The cute maid uniform lies directly opposite, as if looking at the girl. She didn't understand how she was here. Something was definitely wrong here, and she needed to find out. They also mentioned some viscount whom the girl did not know. The main character was pulled out of her thoughts by her interlocutor, who continued to talk about something all this time. Lifting the girl out of bed, she says that her task today is to clean the stairs. There shouldn't be a speck of dust, otherwise it will be worse. The dark-haired lady wanted to complain about her joints, which usually hurt mercilessly when moving quickly, but that was not the case. She caught herself thinking that the pain had disappeared. Great feeling, like you're young again. It seemed that the grandmother was simply in a completely different body. Nothing felt real anymore. All she had to do was close her eyes, and she wouldn't need to think about anything. However, her own hands suddenly attracted attention. Absolutely tiny, chubby hands that could not be their own. A beauty with short, dark hair looked into the reflection. Black, large like a fawn's eyes, young face and soft features proved once again that the girl was no longer in her body. Shock and confusion showed in the young lady's eyes. Horror approached, trying to take over consciousness, and the girl put her hands to her face. It was simply impossible. It couldn't happen, and it wasn't real. For the second time that day, the girl is pulled out of her thoughts by the same maid. The screams seemed to cover my ears, preventing me from thinking about anything else. She should move faster and finally get to work. No one will wait. Walking along the corridor, the heroine still did not understand at all what was happening. She is now wearing different clothes, working on someone's estate. And the most important thing is that she has changed. She didn't change her hair or anything because she just moved into a different image. The stairs really look very dirty. Dust literally lies in clumps on the steps. It's completely impossible for the girl to understand how the people living here could bring the castle to such a state. As she approached the fork, the girl realized that no one had told her which staircase should be washed. There are several of them here, and she was not at all happy with the prospect of cleaning the entire space. It is very difficult to find out the truth because there was no one nearby who could tell. It's even more difficult to just decide without any advice. The girl is at a complete dead end. It's time to show your capabilities. It's much easier to just remove both ladders instead of having to find someone and ask what exactly Hami should do. The mop quickly ends up in your hands, and a mischievous smile appears on your mischievous face. First up was the carpet. A beautiful scarlet color that definitely attracts attention but collects too much dust and dirt. The girl carefully lifts the edge, squatting down. The red carpet is raised, revealing a hidden surprise, a whole heap of some kind of small dirt. The girl's face wrinkles. She clearly wanted to sneeze, but restraining herself was much more important. The heroine did not expect that everything would turn out this way. Next in line is the staircase. Water and detergents will help greatly, because in this case, it will be quick and convenient to wash everything. The wet rag begins to work intensively wiping the steps. As soon as everything is finished, attention turns to the hall in which the girl is located. It seems she still has some free time, which means she can have time to clean up, even here. You can notice how everything around you slowly begins to literally shine with cleanliness. Hami is actively working with the mop, humming some incoherent tune from his past life to himself. A beautiful antique fireplace also needs a good cleaning. The item is trimmed with gold and therefore requires proper care to avoid darkening. The building turns out to be quite tall. It would be more convenient to stand on some kind of stool or chair, but there is nothing suitable nearby. How inconvenient it is to be short. The cleaning is finally coming to an end. Putting her hand to her face as if wiping away sweat, the main character smiles joyfully. She is extremely pleased with herself, and nothing can change it. The work was successfully completed. Now you can finally rest. After the first hard day at work, you just want to sit down, so the beauty gently lowers herself onto the bed, softening the landing with her hand. Sitting on the bed in her room, the girl is only now thinking about everything that is happening. She didn't have time while cleaning, but now her thoughts are becoming more and more confused. It is not at all clear what happened. Hami thought that her life supply had dried up and she was no longer there. There is some truth in this, but if so, where is it now? The gaze involuntarily falls on the small hands. No one knows, and no one will answer the question of who this girl is and how it all happened. She will have to stay in this body indefinitely. Perhaps over time the girl will again become old and decrepit, just as she was before today. Confusion tries to cover you completely, not giving you a chance to get out, but you should control your actions. Reality was a blur. Nothing seemed real, and so a bunch of questions popped up in my head as if out of nowhere. My eyes involuntarily ran around the whole room in search of an object to observe in order to be distracted. The good thing was that now the 89-year-old lady would finally have the opportunity to rest. Even with cleaning, and even with all the responsibilities, the girl was confident that she would be able to find the positives. A beautiful castle sparkles in the sun. It's a bright, warm spring day outside. The roofs sparkle from how well they are polished. Guests are invited to the house. One young lady covering her mouth pours out compliments about how nice and clean it is here. Her companion agrees, saying that Winston should not be modest because the house is truly amazingly restored. The red-haired Duke does not understand what is happening. This mansion is over 100 years old, and even the maids refuse to clean it, and then someone pays him such a compliment. This was quite unexpected. One of the girls continues the theme of the beauty of the house, but talking about the chandelier. The thing shines so cleanly that it seems like a completely new chandelier. Even if it is not, the man is only silent in surprise. One of the main servants, without keeping him waiting, approaches the owner. A greeting escapes his lips. The answer never comes because the Viscount cannot believe that he is in his own house. Approaching the elderly man, the Duke tilts his head slightly and asks, expecting a clear answer. It turns out that this was all the work of the new maid who did her best. The servant talks about a 15-year-old orphan whom he took in not long ago. It's only been a few days and she's had to get used to it, but she did a great job today. No one even expected this, and therefore there was no limit to surprise. The Viscount smiles warmly, realizing that thanks to this girl, he managed to save face in front of the guests. The guy should have thanked this girl. All her efforts did not go unappreciated by her tenacious eye. Straightening his tie and hiding his smile, the Duke continued his conversation with his interlocutor. He asked that the lady be invited to his office as soon as the guests had left. He had questions and good intentions, so it was worth the wait. Hami carefully entered the open office and stood in the middle of the room, as if frozen in a silent question. She was wondering what happened, but in front of her she only saw a man she did not understand, who called her to him. Unexpectedly for herself, she still decided to ask why they were looking for her. It seems that the girl just made a mistake addressing the guy in exactly that tone, but luckily, she quickly figured out what was what. She shouldn't have behaved like that. The subordinate immediately runs up to the Viscount, trying to explain the situation. It seems that Hami has not yet been taught basic etiquette, and that is why she started the conversation in the wrong place. The man only smiled faintly, understanding the situation. The girl should have been sent to a maid to be taught manners, but this did not happen. They decided that at least for now this was not necessary, because the girl was here for something completely different. She was called to thank her. The young lady's eyes slowly widened. She did not understand why she was called a commoner, a servant, and an orphan. It was all too unexpected. Hami didn't know why she ended up here, why she had this particular fate, and she didn't know why she had such a name, but it didn't matter. Even if she ended up in any other body, she would not give up anything. This wasn't the worst option yet. A young body full of vitality together with an 89-year-old body full of common sense seemed like a godsend. She was given the opportunity to once again live this life the way she wanted. The girl was asked her name, clarifying whether it was true that that was her name, to which she only nodded in response. I don't know if it's really possible to use this name, but she had no choice. Putting his hand to his face, the guy continued his remark. For everything the girl did, he wanted to do something for her in return. It didn't matter what it was, because she could get whatever she wanted as a reward. Without thinking even for a minute, the maid quickly and indistinctly muttered something. She only asked for thread and fabric. The desire was strange and incomprehensible, but this is exactly what she would like to receive in return. Silence fell over the room. The girl understood that if they owned such an estate, then they would probably not spare some fabric for her. They don't ask for many things at once. She was quite determined, eager to get the treasured things. A little confused about the young lady's motives, the Viscount nodded in agreement. He promises that he will tell the maid and she will give everything separately, bringing it to the room. The only thing that bothered him was uncertainty. Perhaps the girl wanted to get something else but just didn't want to talk. Joy instantly appeared on the beauty's face. She literally rejoiced at how she would be able to get everything she wanted. Lowering her tone of voice, the girl says that all this will be more than enough. The Duke decides to switch to a whisper. Addressing his servant, he talks about Hami. She doesn't know life at all. Yet she's only 15 years old. The order was to increase her salary so that she would have enough for everything. In a normal tone, the man addresses the girl, saying that the maid will provide her with a supply of fabric and thread. It was more a statement of fact, but the girl only bowed as a sign of respect and expressed words of gratitude. The girl was really good at cleaning. This was one of her favorite activities. She knew exactly how it was done, and therefore was able to do all the necessary work without difficulty. However, the best thing in this world is sewing. Once upon a time, it was not only a hobby, but also a way to earn money. Literally, everyone around her liked her work, and it was logical because they couldn't help but admire her. From childhood, the girl studied and her skill grew, so that she became a real artist. This could not but please me, because now there was an opportunity to do everything possible. A set of beautiful multicolored threads and dark silk fabric lay in full view. It seems that the request was heard, and now the main character has everything she needs to be happy. The box with accessories quickly ended up on the girl's lap. Her eyes curiously looked at the things offered to her, just the things that could help her get the first job done. The first thing that came to mind was that curtains and tablecloths in mansions don't go well together. Perhaps this is something she should take on. It would be a great honor for her to do it all over. The next second, several girls in nightgowns surrounded Hammy. Questions rained down from all sides, but the most important of them was that they would like to know why the girl went to the Viscount. It seemed that the interlocutors were completely incapable of waiting. Their eyes literally shone with impatience. Everyone wanted to know what the main character was awarded in the Duke's office. All the girls as one believed that Hami asked not only for fabric and thread, but also for some other more material thing. Listening to all this, the beauty only closed her eyes and smiled kindly. She had nothing to say because she only had threads. One of the maids fell into her dreams thinking about what she could ask for if she had the opportunity. The first idea was to say that exquisite lace was needed. The other dark-haired maid was a true lady. She needed an elegant hat, and preferably a beautiful dark sea green like all ladies. The blonde closing her eyes recalled her desire with pleasure. She really wanted gloves, so the girl would have asked for them. According to her, the hands did not look so nice without gloves. The beauties continued to argue about something while Hami was lost in her thoughts. They are probably only 17, 18 years old, and this is a great time for new desires, achievements, and everything else. One of those present turned her gaze somewhere to the side, paying attention to something interesting. It was not clear what it was there, but it seemed she understood. The beautiful embroidered dragon literally sparkled in its own light. Bright red color, massive teeth, and most importantly, all this is embroidered from thread on fabric. The girls never cease to admire what she is like. Hami is talented. The answer was a remark that had been prepared for a long time. The girls saw today that the tablecloths and curtains were not very suitable, so the decision to replace them turned out to be the best one. It was truly amazingly done. A second later, the door swings open. The dark-haired girl is indignant. She thinks it is unacceptable to scream at night. The face showed rage, although there was almost no reason for it. The interlocutors quickly began to fuss. It was none other than Josephine, and if things went that way, then she might complain about them. They all should have quickly returned to bed. The only one in the bed was Hami. The maid stood in the middle of the room in absolute silence. The girl sitting on the bed also did not dare to say even a word, fearing the consequences, or rather, simply not knowing what to say. Approaching the bed, Josephine began her reproaches. She wondered why she didn't go to bed and turn off the lights when she should have. The dark-haired girl just widened her eyes without insisting on anything, and quietly said that it was too early for her to go to bed. Anger suddenly grips the interlocutor. She does not tolerate such an impudent attitude towards herself. The Viscount thanked this girl, but this does not mean that she has the right to speak to her in such a tone and snap at her. A slight note of contempt was reflected on Hami's face. I didn't want to argue and spoil the relationship even more when it would have been easier to just go to bed. In her thoughts, she had long ago agreed on everything. Contempt is the most disgusting character trait. The girl broke into a feigned smile, saying that the girl was still smart even though she didn't look like it. The most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. The scream filled the entire room again. The young lady still didn't want to calm down. She screamed about how Hami let her down and simply pretended that she was doing poorly. Whereas, when the Viscount appeared with the guests, the girl decided to show her abilities. Having lowered her head from embarrassment and irritation, the girl only continued to remain silent. She had nothing to say in response. The lady was such an obnoxious bastard, and it was impossible to shout her down. The head maid appeared literally out of nowhere. A strict lady with glasses showing with her appearance how fair she is, even without words. The next remark was addressed to none other than Josephine. She should have gone back to her room and not tried to start another conflict out of nowhere. There was no choice but to do just that. The figure is hiding in the doorway. The lady sighs with relief, only saying that she doesn't understand what's wrong with her, because the girl is always trying to ruin someone's whole mood. It was not worth paying attention to such people, considering that she would later get hers. The lady turns to Hami. The lamps in the maid's quarters are quite low on oil, so she should definitely go to bed early before it runs out. You shouldn't fall asleep in the dark if you have phobias. The girl lowered her eyes to the floor. She was not very comfortable communicating with this woman because she did not know her at all. It seemed that everything around was completely new and unknown, just like her. Lying in bed, Hammy still couldn't sleep. There was no sleep in either eye, which gave the impression that she had slept the entire previous week without interruption. It was difficult considering that it was completely dark around. The window attracts attention. Only one door is open, and the moonlight stretches across the room in a light train. The thought flashes through the heroine's head about how beautiful the moon really is. The decision comes immediately, and now bare feet are already on the wooden floor. The girl is not cold at all. She has one goal. Even this lighting will be more than enough for embroidery. Sitting comfortably on the windowsill, the beauty gets to work. She has quite a lot to do before she feels tired and finally flies off to the kingdom of Morpheus. The morning came completely unnoticed. One of the main servants entered the hall and seemed speechless. The only thing that could be said was some kind of incoherent muttering. The room was decorated with beautiful embroidery. All the tapestries, curtains, and even carpets fit together perfectly. The scarlet hues shone artfully against the blue walls. It seems that a fairy visited the castle that night. The curtains attracted the most attention. The handsome tigers and white flowers seemed to be looking straight at everyone around them. The embroidery was truly wonderful. Ornaments and dragons with tigers look more like paintings. Everything was done in the best possible way, so there's nothing to complain about considering that no one asked to do this. Some rustling sounds from the curtains attract attention. The servant slowly raises his head in bewilderment. It turns out that young people wake up quite early, but no matter what. The girl carefully corrects everything. The question of whether this is her job comes out of her mouth, and the answer is yes. According to her, her grandmother didn't like it, so she changed it. It sounds strange, but now this thing is not the most important thing. Sincere surprise and confusion is displayed on the man's face. It seemed to him or the girl was talking about some granny and also in the third number. The morning didn't start as usual, and that's a fact. Realizing that they were looking at her strangely, Hami faltered and tried to quickly correct herself. She says that it was her doing, and everything that happened here today was not an accident or a fairy, but precisely the young lady who is now standing right here. Turning away, the elderly man cannot believe his ears. Just as an ordinary maid managed to replace all the curtains in the house overnight, she also replaced them with a handmade masterpiece. I just couldn't wrap my head around why this happened, even though it was nice. New remarks are heard. Hami finishes trying to straighten the curtains and suddenly mentions the tablecloth. She managed to complete her work, but according to her, she is not sure that they will all like it. Another attack of shock seizes the servant. How can this be true? Both pairs of eyes look down somewhere, noticing something interesting. A beautiful embroidered dragon looks at people. Dark and light purple tones convey richness and high quality. The work has been done successfully, and there is no way to undo it. The man, without looking up, tries not to ask too many questions. The only thing he's interested in is whether it's true that the dragon is the maid's job. Hami tries to protest with his hands behind his back. For her, this is not a large amount of work, and therefore we should not be so surprised. She doesn't ask for thanks because everything suits her even in this form. Various sounds of admiration and disbelief were heard in the maid's room. The voices were surprised. They are offered valuable things that are completely unclear how they will get to them. It was truly amazing. The girls carefully try on gifts. Beautiful lace, an elegant hat, and lacy gloves were just what they needed. They were just talking about all these things just yesterday and definitely didn't expect to hold them in their hands today. Hami watches all this with pride, putting his hand to his chest. Now you can always turn to her, and she will definitely do everything in her power to help and provide the desired things. The only thing that could go wrong was that the girl called herself an old lady again. The interlocutors look up from their conversations, not understanding what just happened here. After all, the young lady couldn't just slip up like that, but it all ends quickly. Hami changes to his real name, trying to hide all traces. White gloves with skillfully embroidered black roses fit the hands just perfectly. You can admire them for hours no matter what. How did the maid manage to do all this herself? The friends still can't get enough of new things. Even the ladies of the court have nothing like this, because it all looks even much better than in the store, which cannot but delight. There is no limit to joy. The answer is a smile that spreads across his face. The beauty can't help but smile, knowing that her work is appreciated. For those who are comfortable with a needle and thread, this is not that difficult. It just takes time and a little talent. The girl begins a story about Lacey's hook, but is abruptly interrupted. Everyone has only one question. Can everyone really do this? Shock is displayed on the faces of the ladies, who clearly do not believe her words, but perhaps somewhere deep down they want to believe. Those present immediately surrounded Hammy from all sides. They definitely need to learn to knit like her, and this can no longer be avoided. Pleas for training pour in on the girl, who seems slightly confused. One friend even offers half her monthly salary in exchange for lessons. Young girls, without waiting for an answer, understand everything from the emotions of the interlocutor. Hugging the maid tightly, they cannot get enough of their little victory. Laughing, she only says that she should be released. One of the girls was almost jumping with happiness. Without ceasing to ask Hami whether it is true that she agrees to train them, they still cannot get away from the lady. They will just have to listen to all the instructions, but first, they need to know what to do. The dark-haired girl's dreams were quite logical, knowing how much she loved hats and everything connected with them. She really wants to make hats or caps and then wear them when she has a day off. The blonde wants to do something even more sophisticated than the lace gloves she received as a gift. Perhaps some leg warmers or some kind of blouse to wear. The youngest has many more requests. The only task is to learn how to sew beautiful dresses. It makes absolutely no difference whether they are made with lace or with any other element, because the main goal is to create a thing. It should be just right for parties. The maid was slightly taken aback by so much work and decided to put her friends in their place, saying that they should think about their first job. The problem is that beginners may not be able to do something complex, and that is why it is worth choosing something more accessible. The first step to take is to learn how to sew and sew on buttons. This is the very basics and should be easy to follow. The answer is sorrowful words of agreement. The girls clearly did not expect such a turn, but for the sake of a dream, you can even do this. Training is to begin tomorrow. A friend told me to bring a hoop to start working. This is not the most difficult thing, and the item can be easily purchased at any sewing store. This is how hand sewing classes for beginners opened in the maid's room. Everything moves rather slowly, but step by step they become more experienced. Every evening, sitting on the floor next to teacher Hami's bed, the girls listen carefully to the instructions and try to do everything in the best possible way. Just a few days later, the young lady's lessons become even more popular. Sitting in a room in the evening, maids from other rooms approach her, knowing exactly why they came. Almost in a whisper, friends ask to join a team to learn sewing. The dark-haired woman is surrounded from all sides, interested in the conduct of classes. Everyone in the area knows that her courses are very popular among people, and even experienced, and adult maids want to come here. An extraordinary success. Silence enveloped the luxurious room. It seemed that she crawled into every corner, preventing penetration. However, everyone violated someone's words, which seemed to express dissatisfaction and surprise of the owner of the voice. A handsome, red-headed young man with beautiful blue eyes. He and no one else was the one asking questions here. This is Cassian Winston, the young master of this estate, who it seemed would very soon rule everything here. It's a beautiful bedspread, and it would seem everything looks great here, but the dissatisfaction came from the grass embroidered on it. The boy continued to be indignant at the inequality because there was a dragon embroidered on his father's blanket and a gerbera flower on his sister's bed while he got this incomprehensible creation. Anger had no place here, but the young man clearly did not want things to remain as they were now. Only there was grass on his blanket, and it was almost humiliating because this is a master. He should have been given everything the same as his family. Approaching the blonde maid, Cassian begins to give out decrees that no one needs. The first thing he would like is for the blanket to be taken away and replaced with something else more elegant. The girl tries to convince the boy to look at the thing, because it is still beautiful, but it was not to be. The young man was only confused by indignation and such impudence, but still decided to stand up for himself. He really didn't like it, and therefore asked for everything to be redone the way he wanted. Thoughts quickly turned in the wrong direction, and thoughts led in the wrong direction. He should have thought about it right away, but he only came to it after a while. The best solution was to call here the maid who started it all from the very beginning, the one who did this work. The gentleman begins to think aloud. He promises that he will tell the girl how to make something new, but now in a way that suits him. But what to do if he still doesn't like it? It seems that the answer to this question has also been prepared for a long time. The lady couldn't even get a word in, but that wasn't necessary. She already knew perfectly well why young Cassian was doing all this. The guy clearly wanted to skip the next lesson, which is why he said that he wanted to completely control the creation process in order to have his say. Not even a minute had passed before the boy started screaming. Impatience took over, so there was such a reaction. The maid, just looking down, did not understand why she was chosen to scold, because there was no guilt here. Tears rolled down the young lady's cheeks. She didn't want the boy to miss class, so the best solution was to start asking him. This shouldn't take much time, which means the lesson can take place on time as usual without any problems. Winston understands his position. It will not be possible to move away from the work that he has to do. Asking the interlocutor to stop crying, the guy says that he will just give the maid instructions, and that's all. Already hiding behind the door, the blonde promises that she will immediately bring the lady here. It won't take more than 10 minutes, so you just have to wait a little. The gentleman is lost in his thoughts. With a smile on his face, he notes that it will not be difficult for him to carry out his insidious plan, namely to give too many recommendations so that the girl cannot leave so quickly, thereby delaying time. Besides, it was a great opportunity to meet the new maid, but the guy didn't even know what to ask to depict on the blanket. Hami sits calmly on her bed in her bedroom. The friend suddenly bursts into the room calling her name and saying that Cassian wants to see her. Confusion quickly appears on the beauty's face. The question freezes on the girl's lips, because she really doesn't understand at all what is happening and why it's all for the answer never comes, because the interlocutor says that they should hurry up. Knowing how much the lady craves, details the promise of telling along the way certainly sounds convincing. Trying to hurry up, the girl suddenly remembers something and stops. She was lucky that she had a good memory, so the words about needing fabric and thread came out of her mouth. You shouldn't forget such an important thing when you go to the owner. Hami already directly asks what is going on, and why out of the blue she is being called somewhere. The blonde, carefully gathering fabrics into an armful, tries to talk about the young master at the same time. He didn't like embroidery, and now he has a desire to control the process. There is no need for long thoughts. And having finished getting ready, the interlocutor offers to tell her what awaits her friend, noting that as a maid, she shouldn't tell her this at all. But it will be better. The first most important thing. It is very difficult to communicate with a young man. The girls are already quickly walking along the corridor hung with beautiful red curtains. The words continue to flow in a continuous stream. You should always say yes and never refuse, because later there can be many problems. It's worth finding out which ones. The story continues. The owner is really stubborn and unstable, and this is one of the worst character traits. It will still happen, and she will understand when she gets a click on the nose. The blonde visibly darkened. Memories took her somewhere far away. The next words were about the nanny. When she was alive, Cassian was completely different, but 2 years ago the woman suffered a serious illness, and after that she was unable to recover. The girl seemed ready to cry. This story brought sadness even to people who were never present here, and even more so to all the other family members. The maid sadly thought that this nanny was like a mother to her too. After the Viscountess died, this lady took the young man into her care and raised him as her own son. There was nothing more beautiful than her attitude towards the boy, but it all ended quite quickly and joylessly. However, in any case, Cassian is a man with a difficult and sad fate, even if the Viscount tried to find a new nanny for his son, which was unsuccessful due to the stubbornness of the baby. It was very difficult to cope with the young man's temper, and therefore even if one of the nannies matched the description and experience, she did not stay long. Smiling a little, Hami commented, saying that they were all just running away from him. They stopped abruptly. A friend hands over the necessary fabrics and threads to the dark-haired beauty. Not appreciating her humor, she only wrinkled her nose, saying that she was not asking for anything. You just need to be careful and everything will be fine. The things ended up in the girl's hands when the interlocutor continued her story. She should have finished all her work with the blanket before the teacher arrived so that he could conduct the lesson without any interruption to learning. The lady exhaled air as if experiencing relief because it seemed that the girl understood everything. The only and final warning was that you should never mention the Viscountess in the presence of young Cassian. The next second, the friend raises her hand and knocks on the patterned door. There is no answer, but it is already clear to her that she can enter, so the blonde, looking away, invites the main character to enter. A slight smile lit up the friend's face, and she decided to say her last words. She was going to go get ready for Professor Blake's arrival, so she only had 10-15 minutes before she had to quickly leave. The girl was left standing completely alone at this huge door. The maid disappeared somewhere immediately after she finished her remark. The only thing she had to do was enter the room. The room is decorated even more richly and therefore seems very luxurious. Tall, almost panoramic windows, dark curtains that clearly lack beautiful embroidery, and beautiful but ordinary chandeliers. The sun hits at a beautiful angle, illuminating everything. A handsome guy sits on the sofa with his hand on his chin. Blue eyes look thoughtfully to the side, making it clear that the person is clearly somewhere far away in his thoughts, without surfacing. The maid does not dare to break the silence and tear the owner out of his thoughts. She continues to stand quietly at the door, clasping her hands. She should really tell her, since she doesn't know where to start. Confusion and even a little sadness are displayed on the face of the young heroine. In her thoughts, the girl is unable to believe that this baby is the young heir of the family. These thoughts haunt and are quite disturbing. But even more strange is the fact that the maid is strongly drawn to this boy. The young man was a little distracted from his important thoughts. The eyes slowly scan the room and stop at the figure near the entrance. No one told him that the new maid was so cute. She is truly of extraordinary beauty. Perhaps if someone had told about this earlier, everything would have been a little different, and then the young man would have shown himself in a better light. But the moment was missed. Black, shining short hair beckons, inviting you to gently run your hand through it, a sweet face and graceful features. The girl cannot help but be attracted. A smile like the sun illuminates everything around, giving people plenty of pleasure. It is not clear how the beauty ended up here, but perhaps it was fate. Still very young, but with a very mature aura, giving the impression that this is not a 15-year-old person at all. She stands in front of the person. The main character says nothing, but her face expresses embarrassment. She is not very pleased that they look at her like this and say absolutely nothing, but she is not going to say anything. The owner, in turn, only opens his mouth, freezing in a silent sound. The girl is asked to sit on the sofa, and her eyes automatically switch to the gray thing standing directly opposite. Now is the time for classes. Then why is there an offer to sit and talk about something? The young lady still doesn't dare to say anything, but a genius comes to her mind. If anything, she can always come up with some excuse to leave right before classes start, and then everything will be fine. Already sitting on the sofa, the lady tried to delve into Cassian's words and understand what he really wanted. The boy wanted her to once again embroider a blanket with a luxurious, but at the same time, beautiful and attractive design in a minimalist style, so that there was not too much unnecessary. The embroidery had to be special and impressive, but at the same time, not too flashy. The guy and his requests were very difficult to understand, but Hami silently continued to listen, trying not to miss anything. He wanted the same size, but after a minute the young man changed his mind, wanting the size to be slightly smaller than the previous one. According to him, it would look much simpler, sleeker, and more beautiful, so it would be worthwhile to hurry up with the work. Without listening to anything else, the sweet person unrolled the fabric where threads of different colors were hidden for every taste and desire, saying that now you can think about something. She definitely had a picture in her head of what it was supposed to look like. The thread ended up in the needle, and the girl immediately, without wasting a second, got to work. With deft movements, something similar to the outline of a future work of art began to appear on the bedspread, showing and confirming once again how talented the heroine is. Blues and greens sparkled across the fabric. It was difficult to understand what exactly was depicted, so the guy wanted to ask something but hesitated, thinking that he should just continue to quietly watch the maid at work. A little confusion took over every part of the body. The Viscount wanted everything to turn out as beautiful as possible, so that everyone around would literally envy and hope would remain, making it clear that this would be the case. Cassian is tired of sitting, apparently hoping that he can somehow control his work better, and so the boy carefully rises from his chair, heading to the girl's place opposite him. The finger slides along the fabric, stopping somewhere near the white tiger's eye. The needle is literally a centimeter from the location of his hand, which clearly does not scare the guy at all. The girl's hand approached at the speed of light. The bang seemed to deafen everyone in the room, not giving even a single chance to maintain proper silence. The woman screamed, calling the guy a boy. The young man in turn is very surprised. It was not clear to him why they abruptly drove him away, and they were also trying to put him in his place, despite the fact that he was the master of the situation. The reddened hand hurt quite a bit from everything that had happened. Hammy just exhales and says that he just needs to be a little more careful because there is a needle. It's always quite easy to get hurt and end up in a huge amount of pain. It was only worth waiting a little. The grandmother inside the girl perked up, and this time everything changed completely. The lecture on safety goals was making itself felt, and so the conversation turned to the fact that if the young master got hurt, there was nothing she could do about it. Having lowered his eyes to the floor, the guy did not understand why he was being scolded after all. In his opinion, it was just a small injection that would not cause any harm. All thoughts poured into words, which was a huge mistake. The girl began the topic of diseases, and the fact that there is still no cure for some of them, and half of them can be obtained through a needle prick, which should not be done under any circumstances. The image of a grandmother immediately pops into my head, who also scolded her grandchildren because of all sorts of minor injuries such as burns or something else. The boy lowered his gaze somewhere to the floor, not understanding what else could be said. The young lady was right about everything, but a strange feeling was still in the air. He didn't expect such behavior. The topic quickly changed, and the conversation turned again to the drawing on the blanket. The girl says that she has finally finished, and the guy has to choose one of the proposed painting subjects, one of which was a dragon, another a turtle, and the third even more interesting, a tiger. Interest showed on his face, but the answer was not long in coming. The hand reaches for the bedspread and the index finger points to one of the works of art. A white tiger would look really nice on a bed. Giggling a little, the dark-haired girl notices a small but interesting detail. It seems that the boy clearly loves tigers, and he likes them. This was noticeable even from a distance because it was difficult not to understand why this was happening. The only question manages to escape the young man's lips. He doesn't understand why the maid allows herself to communicate with him so informally, while everyone else is literally in horror, trying to avoid unnecessary topics of conversation, and are afraid to talk about anything. Confusion is the only dominant emotion on the face at the moment. Only recently has Hummy allowed himself to talk to the gentleman in such a tone as if they had already become friends. Disappointment flashed across the young lady's face. She seemed to want things to stay the same, but she didn't expect things to turn out this way. I only had enough strength to mumble something indistinctly. It turns out that she was not allowed, but for some reason she decided that everything impossible was possible. Seeing all the emotions on the interlocutor's face, the red-headed one feels like the master of the situation. Words without any thought are rearranged into sentences trying to convey only one correct information. If the guy allows it, then everything will become possible. Folding his hands on his knees, the young man looks somewhere to the side conspiratorially. He had one idea to carry out his plan, so he talks about his condition that he has, so that the girl can continue to address him in this form. The young people had different positions in society, and therefore Cassian simply could not give his consent without any reason. Hami understands that this is true, but fear deliberately creeps up from all sides. The conversation is suddenly interrupted. Redhead turns his attention to the door and notices something. It seems that Teacher Blake has already arrived, which means that there will be no time delay. Hearing the mention of the lesson, Hami realized that she was late and did not follow her friend's advice. Better late than never, so the brunette quickly got up from her chair. The decision to leave could not cause a negative reaction. Already heading towards the exit, the owner's voice stops. The young man, indignant at this behavior, says that he has not yet finished what he called the girl 4, and therefore she should sit back even if she didn't really want to. The main character was clearly not pleased with this treatment, given that now her promise was under threat, but she was not going to contradict protests that the boy had a lesson soon stopped working long ago. The door to the room opened slowly. A man's voice says goodbye to Julia, saying that he can handle everything else even if it is quite difficult. Then the guy turns to the gentleman, saying that he is entering. A handsome man with blonde hair and green eyes, his mindless gaze bored into the room, noticing those present. How beautiful he was could not be described in words. The sophisticated clothing seemed to add a little charm. The girl felt, to put it mildly, uncomfortable under the gaze of these two who were in the same room with her. I wanted to say that she was very sorry, but the teacher was the first. The man apologizes for entering without knowing that the owner already has a guest. Cassian puts his hand to his chin in a mock gesture, talking about the terrible manners of the teacher who should now leave as quickly as he entered. It would seem that everything is going according to plan, but the man is a tough nut to crack. Now is lesson time, so this action was completely justified. The young man continues to make fun of him, talking about how he would like the teacher to learn how to burst into all rooms without knocking, but the girl interrupted his remark, getting up from the sofa. The angry tone made it clear that she was clearly not herself, because you couldn't talk like that to a teacher whom you should, on the contrary, try to listen to. The boy rolled his eyes, not fully realizing what had just happened, because this maid again put him in his place, shaming him in front of the teacher, which he did not like at all. Mr. Blake froze in mute silence with questions displayed on his face. He couldn't believe that a stranger would stand up for him under such circumstances, even if she shouldn't have. Hami did not want to stop for a second, continuing to chatter. The young boy should have respected the choice of his parents in the person of the teacher, because they want only the best, and he should also study well and diligently for a great future. The boy was destined to become a big man, and no one dared to change that. Realizing that she has clearly already said too much, the girl quickly leaves the room, throwing only a few additional words in parting. There was only one conclusion. You just have to study hard, and then everything will be just fine no matter what. The door slammed on the other side, leaving the two people in complete silence, completely alone in the room. None of them fully understood everything that had just happened and why this particular maid behaved this way. Evening came completely unnoticed, casting its darkness over the city. The guy lies in bed and looks thoughtfully at the ceiling. Thoughts about Hami are still spinning, trying to create at least something intelligible similar to an answer to all his questions. The redhead couldn't stand it any longer, so he jumped up and sat up on his bed. The girl dared to hit him on the arm, disgrace him in front of the teacher, and all this was absolutely absurd. She is simply an apprentice maid. But because of her skill with a needle, she seemed to consider herself one of the aristocracy. Clenching his fist in indignation, Cassian still could not understand what was happening to him now. He had never felt such strange anger towards anyone before. The informal speech was perhaps the most annoying. The gaze fell on the bedspread with beautiful tigers. It had to be said that it didn't turn out very well, so the lady would have to redo it several times, but most likely she would have done it better and better each time. Where did the stranger learn to sew so skillfully? I no longer had the strength to look at the animal. The boy went back to bed, placing his cheek on the pillow, still thinking about none other than the maid. How did she still manage to be such a beautiful and pleasant person in addition to all this? I didn't want to admit it to myself, but the lady was really very beautiful. All facial features are very graceful, and kind eyes seem to invite you to come up and hug a person. In an attempt to forget removing the image from his head, the guy closes his eyes, forgetting about everything in the world. Not even a minute passes before Cassian rolls over onto his stomach, still wailing. You can't be so charming without any reason. No one chooses their appearance, but this person seemed to have chosen and also created the best set. Burying himself in a soft, silky pillow, the young Viscount is still in his thoughts. This sweet person did not want to leave her mind at all, which was a little annoying as it interfered with sleep. It's difficult to do anything about it. The morning started out extremely unusual. A gardener in uniform stood under the scorching sun and holding scissors in his hands, prepared to continue his work. It was worth cutting off all the unnecessary branches and leaves before everything became overgrown and got even worse. It still attracted attention. The boy did not want anyone to ask unnecessary questions, but living in a castle, it is impossible to avoid this. So this time, everything happened exactly the same. The elderly man came closer to the guy and was interrupted as soon as he opened his mouth. The elderly man still didn't understand what the joke was about everything that was happening, so he, silently looking down, turned away. The best idea was simply not to disturb the young gentleman so that he wouldn't get stuck. The silence did not last long because the questions began to make their way out on their own. The first and most important was what brought the guy here this early in the morning, when, as at this time, he usually sleeps and has his 10th dream. There was a flashback in my head. Over the previous few hours, the young man managed to visit several places almost simultaneously, namely in the stable, in the chicken coop, and even near the geese. There was and could not be any reason for pride here. I didn't want to go into details, so quickly changing the subject. The boy asks where insects can be found here. Perhaps it would be worth saying what kind of living creatures he was looking for, but this answer did not come. Taking full advantage of the kindness and being the master of the situation, Cassian hinted that it would not be a bad idea to find the big ones, not the small ones. The gardener's eyes widened, and the man himself was perplexed and wondered where the guy was going to use the living creatures. Redhead suddenly thinks about something, but only for 1 second, and the next moment he returns to reality, noticing that he still has one use for the unfortunate insects. Feet shod in stylish and probably expensive shoes, they cross the threshold. The sneakers in which one could dig in the mud disappeared somewhere as soon as the young man got back from the yard to the estate. While searching for a maid, they were finally successful. The beauty was sitting on her bed in the maid's room and quietly doing something which couldn't help but rejoice, since it didn't take more than 10 minutes. All that remained was to gather courage and come closer. A dark bag with secret contents was placed right next to the girl. The boy noticed that she should have unpacked it in his presence, and that it was a gift from the heart. A slight surprise lit up the interlocutor's face. Dark eyes widened, staring at the man standing in front of her, and still not believing what was said, the girl quietly asked if it was really intended for her. Without giving her a single chance to insert at least another word, Cassian asked her to shut up and finally open his homemade package, assuring her that something incredibly wonderful was waiting for her there. Hammy's involuntary tone was still a little surprising, but there was no time to pay attention to it. Relaxing and deciding not to worry about all the existing circumstances, the young lady, tilting her head to the side, quietly agreed to open the gift, leaving not a single chance for reflection for herself. Cute silkworm caterpillars looked at the girl right from the carefully packed package. How could someone come up with such a strange idea for a gift? I couldn't even believe that it was all the work of a 16-year-old boy. Praise was directed towards the young man. The maid noticed that the insects were not so bad because the young man managed to catch such a large number of huge and nimble creatures. Cassian only nodded in response, thinking that the gift would not be suitable, but froze when he heard the words. Reaching out with her hand to the boy's head, Hammy ran her fingers through his hair, gently patting his head, calling the guy a good child, which could not but lead to a stupor. He brought her a gift, and it was more than enough, but everything was not so simple. Smiling as if confirming her words, the dark-haired beauty closes her eyes, talking about how good the boy is. At this moment, she doesn't care about anything at all, because exactly what she needed has already happened and brought her great pleasure. It all continued with the girl taking pity on the caterpillars, recommending releasing them into the wild rather than keeping them in a narrow and uncomfortable pocket. The redhead wanted to say something in response, but was again interrupted and called to action. Light taps on his pocket made it clear that he should hurry before his patience ran out. Insects cannot wait, even if it all sounded terribly ridiculous. The package sent back lies in the hands of the young man, while the maid continues to quietly address him. It would be worth starting right now, but the boy still couldn't budge. The girl promises that she will continue to embroider while he has time to go there and back so she can wait for him. Still with the same thoughtful face but already in the garden, Cassian tried to come up with a clear explanation for the girl's behavior. No one had even dared to address him in this way before, but here the response to his dirty tricks is praise, which the young man rarely received anyway. The caterpillars quickly crawl along the asphalt, trying to escape into some abyss of nearby bushes, which of course is correct, but not enough to accomplish this. Everything that happened no longer seems real. Thoughts completely envelop the young man, although he, in turn, without any intentions, tries to understand what is wrong here. He wanted to do another dirty trick, but everything turned out completely differently than he expected, and all because of this maid. Each time, Cassian managed to come up with new ideas to slip something to the girl. However, the response was quite surprising each time the girl folded her arms across her chest, exclaiming touchingly when she saw the spider. The next time, the boy tried much better, bringing with him a frog, which immediately ended up on Hami's finger, while the young man himself sitting in the bushes was literally ready to cry. The only similarity was the ending of each such prank. The girl thanked the young man and then asked him to let the poor insects out of the bag because she did not like it at all. The boy, not understanding what he should do in order to finally get a negative or positive reaction, always remained confused at the end of the procedures. The sticks and bags remained unused. After a time of such communication and such gifts, the guy literally trailed on the heels of the girl, listening to her advice and everything she told him. As a result, rumors spread throughout the castle, and all the servants whispered incessantly. The young lady communicated with the young gentleman so informally and also completely without fear, as if he were her ward or an old friend who wanted to earn attention. Hami has always been very responsible, and it showed very strongly Cassian was tired quite often, and even now starting to whine, he suggests entrusting the work to someone else and going for a walk instead. At least in the garden, I didn't have to wait long for a refusal. One of the main servants still could not understand what the problem was and why the master suddenly decided to change so much. Not understanding why he liked the new maid so much, the questions became even greater. However, Vincent only smiled, seeing in the girl a new friend for his son. The girl always feels sorry for the young man from the Viscount family. The guy never managed to know the love of his mother or nanny, and therefore it so happened that the main character took on these roles as well as the role of the best friend. The season has changed. The hot summer crept up completely unnoticed, preparing absolutely no one for its arrival. It was a good time of year and a lot of things happened. The friends excelled at embroidery and thanked their savior insanely, often literally every time. As soon as one of them embroidered something new, everyone immediately ran to show it and rejoice. A lot of gratitude came from ordinary servants. Although, oddly enough, Hami did not think that she had done anything special, but this was not the case. The girl often helped the younger master with everything. Even such simple things brought maximum pleasure. Wherever the young lady went, she was showered with praise and gratitude, and oddly enough, during this time she was very successful in her business. Boredom seemed to pervade the young Viscount's entire body, and he still had to read the history of the founding of the state. The worst activity, in his opinion, is reading. Scowling, the boy sat in a chair, continuing to complain about everything. Sometimes it seemed that he didn't like all these lessons so much that one day he would simply run away without telling anyone. The girl, closing her eyes, tried to tell her point of view. If you read a lot of books, you will become an outstanding and successful person, and it is really worth it if you think about it. Looking away, different thoughts enter the guy's head, but one thing he knows for sure is that this will not help him. According to him, the young man is already an outstanding person, so he has no need for books. The conclusion was that Cassian had no intention of even opening the book. Sadness enveloped Hami, and she said that all her life she had dreamed of learning to read. The redhead, turning his head, wanted to laugh, but restrained himself. The desire to learn about books seemed completely strange to him. The girl admits that this is so because, in fact, she cannot read at all. The book, with a characteristic noise, fell out of the young man's hands and hit his knee. He couldn't believe that someone like his interlocutor couldn't do such a simple thing. Deciding not to think about it anymore, the boy continues to ask leading questions, trying to find out the most accurate information. This actually turns out to be true, and the friend cannot read a word. This was perhaps one of the most unexpected news or discoveries in recent memory. For some reason, the young man always thought that the girl could do literally everything, but it turns out that this list included absolutely everything except the alphabet. If a person is simple, then he does not always have time to read, and besides all this, Hami is still very young, so everything is ahead. The words didn't sound very convincing, and his eyes nervously ran around the room, not inspiring any confidence, although Cassian was right. Deciding that words were of no use, the boy began to try to talk about all the virtues of his girlfriend. There were really a lot of them. The guy thought that this was all simply amazing and deserved some praise. The girl sits with her eyes downcast, and it seems that she is about to cry. The young master reproaches himself for being capricious, not wanting to read, or simply complaining about how hard the life of an aristocrat is in front of an illiterate commoner. This was absolutely unacceptable, but it had to happen. Without thinking twice, the red-headed man jumps out of his chair as a brilliant idea came to him. The best option was to teach the young lady to read, and that is what he proposes to do. Hami does not understand what just happened and whether this proposal came from the lips of this boy. She would really like to learn, but she knew absolutely nothing, just like she didn't know what to start with. Patting the place on the sofa next to him with his hand, the young man calls his interlocutor, inviting him to change his position. Such kindness out of nowhere could not be strange because he wanted to help. Thoughtfulness is displayed on the young woman's face. She seems to be weighing the pros and cons in her head, and it's hard to know which category is winning. Obviously, there was no need to think long because within a moment, the maid is sitting right next to the young viscount because she was told to do so. The guy is clearly a little nervous around her, which is noticeable even to the naked eye. The girl understands deep in her soul that these activities will most likely not end well. In this world, for such a commoner, not being able to read is very natural and occurs in literally every second person. The lady lived an unenviable life all her life. She always wanted something more, but it was all too difficult to translate into real life. Her past life personified her as an illiterate person. The inability to do basic things and the lack of basic skills often ate my grandmother from the inside. It seemed that this was a vicious circle, and there was no way out of it. But in the end, the first step was taken. The woman made up her mind, and one day went to a school for old people. The teacher divided people into groups and taught groups of 5 people reading, writing, and other things important in education. Everything was going great, but over time vision began to deteriorate, and due to overwork, all the work was done hastily. As a result, the material was not absorbed as required, and all progress came to naught. The old lady's wishes are a happy, complete family, the health of loved ones, and learning to read. It's quite difficult to do everything at once, only if you are not 25 years old and you are still very young and green. The girl wanted to learn to read books and write without anyone's help, and even in beautiful handwriting, and this was how it was supposed to be. But in the end, something went wrong. Just by taking a wrong turn, something happened. This was completely unexpected, because for such an ignoramus like her, just like that, the road leading to peace and the path of illumination and dreams simply opens up. The kid appeared like seaweed out of nowhere. The girl did not expect that he would undertake her education. The pen sloppily smears crooked handwriting on the paper, making terrible squeaks. Everything will be very difficult indeed. The guy takes some strange piece of paper from his hand, carefully straightening it, not trying to show anything. However, with the following words, he suggests voicing the alphabet one letter at a time so that it is convenient for the girl to repeat after him. Hami was still distracted deep in her thoughts, but a voice interrupted her. The remark that she was incomprehensibly busy was made sternly, and then the young master began to slowly read the letters starting with A and B. The lady did an excellent job, And so the red-haired man praising her decides to move further through the alphabet, offering to continue with B and G. It's clearly not difficult for him to do this, and that's why he wants to have time to go through at least the alphabet. Hami seemed very interested in the process. The letters were given quite easily, so they moved further along the rows as they wanted. The index finger carefully slid along the smooth surface of the sheet, pointing to the hieroglyphs needed to read. It was all really difficult, but quite possible and doable, even if it looked scary at first. The girl couldn't believe that at that age she could learn something new. It was always wonderful to learn, but sometimes things didn't go the way we wanted, and only in another life is it possible to do the impossible. The young master continues to name the letters one by one, which should be continued to be read in order. The eyes themselves are constantly trying to look at the girl sitting next to him, which cannot but distract from the lesson. Violet eyes intently examine the parchment, and lips move slowly, trying to pronounce the letters at least as indistinct sounds. It's really a bit of a smile, but at the same time it's cute how she's trying. Continuing to read, the guy simultaneously says that very soon she will be able to put all her skills into practice. Perhaps this will be reading, or maybe immediately writing, which will become even more literate over time. After some time, the maid suddenly remembered that it was now dinner time. They should have stopped there because as much as studying was not important, eating was on schedule. It worked especially, but after a long and exhausting work. A moment later, Cassian interrupted his interlocutor mid-sentence. He asked that the food be delivered to the room, and then they would not have to interrupt or go anywhere. This arrangement clearly did not suit Hami. She stared at the young man indignantly, starting her tirade about how important it was to eat with the family at the same table, and that if he did not follow the basic rules of etiquette, then everything would be bad. The guy had no choice but to sigh resignedly and get up from his seat. The boy slowly walks towards the door. He really didn't want to stop what he was doing for food or anything at all, since it was nice to be in such company. But he really had no choice. The hand reached out to the black door handle and was about to open the lock, but the words of gratitude made the limb freeze. The young man was really very pleased with this attitude towards himself, especially from a specific person such as this girl. I wanted to scream with joy like a little child, but the answer was only awkwardness and words that he had not done anything special. Ignoring his remark, Hami smiled, saying that today was something special and completely new for her, one of the best lessons in her life, and it cannot be changed. The young man absolutely did not know what to say. The only correct decision was to remain silent and still opening the handle. Move away. Walking down the corridor accompanied by Josephine, the boy still could not understand what had just happened. I couldn't believe that he got to hear words of gratitude. He just taught the girl a little letters, but according to her, she liked it too much. This was unexpected, but at the same time it could not help but please, because this was his first lesson in his life that he taught himself, without anyone's help. A picture of a beauty pops up in my memories literally out of nowhere. The way her eyes ran over the lines, the way she tried to read, and tried her best to ensure that he liked everything. The boy was very, very happy about this arrangement, but it also meant that he should teach her something else, so that she would not want to leave. The thought process could no longer be stopped. It was necessary to find some books for easy reading, but the most difficult question arose, and this was where to get such books in order to continue studying. A white-toothed smile signaled soon approaching success. For some reason, a lot of useful things came to mind. It is worth trying to start with fairy tales that the young man read in childhood, and for now, this will be enough. It's tiring, but you can survive everything. The room of the managing maid with the shutters closed was lit up with loud conversations and incessant laughter on the eve of sleep, which was not worth doing. Gossip is one of the maid's favorite pastimes. The blonde, with a dreamy look, talked about how she had just managed to greet Colin, to which she received only a ton of admiration in response. Her friends say they saw the boy tying her shoelaces. It was not clear where and since when they were so close, but it was quite interesting. Quite often, the employer when hiring prohibits any relationship at work, already knowing in advance how it could end, because sometimes people simply fall in love with each other. This rule also applied to the castle. The girl putting her index finger to her lips says that it is better to be quiet so that no one hears, even if the interlocutor assures that no one will come here. Next on the agenda is Josephine. Such an eternally angry and indignant girl who gives instructions to everyone. It would seem that her character let everyone down, and immediately after the rumor about how she got together with Colin, another rumor began to spread that they had broken up. The young lady simply waved her hand in response to all this, declaring that the maid was not at all interested in that servant. On that vacation, she left the city limits and met someone else who attracted her, and she fell irrevocably in love with him. The girl met some hooligan in an alley, and he saved her thereby bribing the heart of the young beauty. This gossip spread even faster than all the previous ones without any reason. One of the girls with a mini haircut says that it looks more like some kind of romantic comedy, and perhaps this is not so far from the truth since the story is really complicated. Who was that stranger? The man said nothing, not even his name, and disappeared under the light of the moon. The description had been known to everyone for a long time because the man was incredibly beautiful. Black hair and strong shoulders as well as powerful arm muscles. His clothes were quite neat, and Josephine said he had a pleasant aroma. Sadness overcame the girls a little, and the whole room too. Apparently a very attractive person met on her way since she was so lucky. Not everyone gets such a chance, and it's a shame that the young man simply disappeared. The conversation no longer wanted to be sad, and so one of the maids starts talking about her type of man. Blondes are the best in the world, just like blue eyes, which literally make you fall in love more and more every time you look into them. Admiration and a certain love are displayed on the face and in gestures. A blonde and a brunette get into an argument. One of the ladies says that there is nothing special about the guys, while the other tries to argue. Talking about how wonderful they are, the argument flares up out of nowhere, so the best solution is to calm the two divas down. One of the oldest maids is here, carefully spreading her hands and trying to hush up the conflict before it escalates into something more complex and bad. A brilliant idea comes into her head, which will surely appeal to everyone present. Questions fall on Hami. Now she has to answer, and there is no way she can get away. Innocence is displayed on the girl's face, but all the ladies wanted to know what her ideal was. In a split second, the young beauties are already sitting on the floor around the bed on which the girl is located. She is still very young, but this does not mean at all that she does not have an ideal, so it is worth checking out. In the case of this maid, she may be with a very attractive man, because any man would propose to her after knowing all her talents. Doubts creep into your head. The young master has been following the maid everywhere for several weeks now, and always shares all the new news with her. So anything can happen, but that's not the case. Another maid interrupts, saying that this can't be true. Both suddenly fall silent, as if remembering that the subject of discussion is still in the same room as them, and they certainly shouldn't continue in the same spirit as before. Stuttering, one of the girls cannot imagine how Cassian would dare to look down on such a beautiful person. He would not have had the courage because he still needs to grow and grow to perform such an act. There is no way a young man can like a girl. It would be a lie even if it happened. The girls continued their thinking, saying that even if Cassian offered his hand and heart, they must fight for him to the end. The brunette, still holding the paper in her hands, tried not to pay attention to anything. Conversations about anything are not her thing, but at the moment, they were the only things that surrounded the girl. While those in the room continued to discuss the interesting topic of what their children would look like, Hami did not listen to them. She was learning the alphabet, and so she was lost in her thoughts. One of the girls noticed that no matter what anyone says, the young owner was very attractive. His appearance was indeed of extraordinary beauty, and all his friends agreed that they had never met anyone more beautiful, especially considering that he had a special aura that was clearly different from ordinary people. The maid with the pixie cut keeps asking questions to herself. Still, it's really interesting what the guy's future will be like and how everything will turn out, but his character again spoiled the whole raspberry. Not everyone can stand the character, and you need to be like grandma to do it. The conversation is interrupted by a knock on the door which seems quite unexpected. Silence falls like a wave into the room. All three beauties freeze, looking at the door. Only everything that was happening tore the girl out of her thoughts. The cramming of the alphabet was unceremoniously interrupted, and therefore the eyes stared somewhere to the side, trying to understand what was happening. Hearing the young lady's voice, the woman behind the door quickly realized who she was talking to, and already making requests, she said that an annoying fortune teller had come outside. It would be nice if someone gave her some food so she would finally go away. Obviously, the head maid was busy with something very important, so the maids had no choice. It was worth following the instructions so as not to fly out of here. The main character did not understand what the problem was and what was happening. It was unclear what kind of fortune teller we were talking about and what she was, but this was a new task, with the help of which all this had to be found out. Sighs were heard from all sides. The blonde says that this is not something they should talk about, but if it comes down to it, then coming to such a small family of viscounts is a bit of a cruel punishment. Hami did not understand what she was talking about, and that is why it was difficult to decide what exactly she should say and what the reaction should be. The best solution was to simply remain silent, eyes wide open. News began to spread throughout the town not too long ago, and all of them as one were about this fortune teller. Because of spending time with the young master, the girl completely fell out of life and did not know what this was connected with. It turns out that there are rumors that a fortune teller goes to every aristocratic family in search of the future wife of the crown prince. It seems like one of the most disappointing ideas for earning money for food, but it is so because it has one goal: to let someone hear something good and snatch a piece of food. At first, the girl was received with open arms and kindly treated, but with repetitions, they began to treat her much more simply without pitying her. The main character's face only saddened. She always feels sorry for someone who has to beg for food, and this time was no exception. A slippery smile spreads across the brunette's face. She is disgusted by all scammers, and because of them, the honor of normal people is hurt. It seems that they are not doing anything at all in the magician's castle, because the liar has not yet been caught as they should have done. The girls surrounded me again, Hami giving her instructions. It was she who had to meet face to face with that imposter today. The whole operation was quite safe, because if you don't believe a single word said, everything will be wonderful. The girl walks into the kitchen and is greeted by a joyful greeting from a red-haired man, offering her something to eat. He simultaneously asks why she came and whether there was a reason for it. This kind soul is the castle's cook, and right now she is immediately offered the cookies that are left. The main character smiles tenderly. She had always liked this man from the very first day she was in this place. He really got it from the young master because of his bad character. But since the young lady appeared at the estate, Cassian moderated his ardor, which served as great gratitude on the part of his friend. The young man clearly remembered something, and therefore quickly bustled around in the kitchen. It was quite strange, but if you just waited a couple of minutes, this terrible secret could be revealed. The next second, a bowl of custard materializes in front of the girl. She loved cakes and muffins with such filling, which the man was well aware of. This is a cream created specifically for baking and is definitely worth trying without any discussion. Passing the dishes into the hands of the maid, red-haired continues to smile, saying if anything happens, he is always ready to give even more so that they can all eat together and enjoy it. Joy knew no bounds. These small gestures of attention always seemed incredibly sweet and charming. Words of gratitude were already like an obligation after which you can ask for something more important. The girl also needs milk and bread. Nodding in response, agreeing with the request, the hero asks if anything else is needed. Without hesitation, the girl asks for ham and cheese if possible. A little thing like that could make her happy. Turning around and going to the other side of the kitchen, the man picked up the basket and began to carefully put all the necessary things. Bread came first, and bread is the most important thing. The question about fruits was very necessary, since Hami almost forgot why she came. The assumption sounds quite convincing, just enough to put it into action. The basket is already full of baked goods and other food, just what you need. The guy asks who she was going on a picnic with, to which the answer is absolutely not what she would like to hear, but what they were obliged to do. The food was intended for the fortune teller herself. Literally a moment later, 2 baskets full of food were in the hands of a fragile girl. A quick thank you made it clear that she was pleased. But in her thoughts, it seemed that she was given too much. The sun shone brightly outside the window, illuminating the estate. The white columns looked quite massive and majestic compared to the people. The main character carefully opens the door to the street, still tightly holding baskets with all kinds of food. There was no need to attract much attention, but she urgently needed to find that same fortune teller, and no one explained to her how to do this. Slight confusion appeared on Hami's face, making it clear that the goal had been achieved. Someone was standing very close right in front of the girl. The stranger was wrapped in a black cloak with a beautiful golden ornament. The face was not visible just like other parts of the body, only secrecy that could be seen from a kilometer away. Noticing the details of her clothing, the heroine decided to ask at least one question. The girl was dressed too tightly, and the interesting thing was, how did she not get steamed yet? Perhaps it was hard for her to breathe, so she was silent. A second later, there is a jug of milk in his hand. The recommendation was to drink it quickly. It would certainly help with thirst and prevent the sun effect. It seemed that the fortune teller had absolutely no powers or emotions. When she said, "Thank you," she almost staggered, making it clear that the clothes were indeed not entirely appropriate. The stranger, bowing her head, greedily drinks the offered drink. Thirst took over her entire body, making the maid sitting next to her think about how long she had to travel. Looking up from the jug, the person praises the food of this house because it is truly prepared very skillfully, and on top of all this, with the soul put into it. More words of gratitude fly from the lips, making it clear to all this that all this time it was not a lady in front of the girl, but a very young man. Smiling, the maid assures that everything is fine and there is still a lot to choose from, so there is no point in rushing. Food must have time to be digested, so the only correct recommendation is to eat very slowly. Patting her interlocutor on the shoulder, as if expressing a kind gesture, the girl continues to talk incessantly. Young people are very inspiring, but in order to get strength, somewhere everyone must eat according to the regime. An incomprehensible muttering from behind a mouthful of food serves as agreement. Just about to bite into this wonderful sandwich once again, the guy freezes and asks if the lady would like to eat something. It all sounds pretty nice, but they call her Grandma again. Turning half a turn, the boy holds out the untouched sandwich, offering his grandmother something to eat because it is very tasty, and it seems that she herself would really like it no matter what. A slight embarrassment mixed with surprise is noticeable somewhere in the depths of Hami's eyes. She heard it wrong, or she was just called old lady for no good reason. No one here knew about her past and past life. But then how did all this happen to her? The young man, smiling, says that she should not be afraid and should not worry about anything. Since he saw this girl, his abilities, so to speak, have grown, and new unusual skills have emerged because she is a fortune teller. Giggling, the guy talks about what a great mood he is in today, so he can tell something. But as a person, he expresses himself only to Grandma and no one else, and only in secret. Sitting closer, the interlocutor began to talk about the fact that the future wife of the crown prince actually lives in this castle. The girl just raised her eyebrow, saying that this is not true, since this is said about this in literally every home. The thing is that no one knew where exactly this girl lived, so the best solution was to go from house to house and search persistently for a long time, but eventually reaching the goal. It was truly worth it and could help everyone around me. The boy clearly did not intend to interfere in the affairs and problems of the future, just as he did not want to spoil the past, so he should relax and not even think about anything there so that it would be easier for everyone. The interlocutor mentioned that the rumor about Granny is not particularly important then. Why spread it? Something relieved the girl's soul, realizing that this was what she had wanted to hear for so long. This made the situation much easier overall. Hami thought about everything that was happening, but the next moment she realized that there was no point in it, and only quietly asked again whether it really was not important, receiving an answer that she did not expect at all. A situation like the old lady's only happens once every few centuries. Have similar situations ever happened? There was never a clear explanation. She found herself in the body of a child, and this, to put it mildly, worried her a little, even if her current life was quite wonderful. But there were still many buts. Pulling the hood almost over his chin, the stranger continues to talk about how, after all, it doesn't matter anymore. The girl should not worry, but simply live as her heart desires. The only thing that remained cloudy was that the fortune teller did not see and did not know whether it was a gift or just fate. The prints are quite blurry and therefore nothing comes out. Hami was a little nervous, clutching her apron with her hands, although she shouldn't have done that. It was incredibly difficult for the girl to accept these words, but at the same time they caused some joy, allowing her soul to start dancing. She indeed can live the way she wishes and finally not think about anything, not be responsible for bad consequences. An unexpected insight illuminated the beauty. The question has been on the tip of my tongue for a long time, but only now I have the courage to ask, what happened to the child who lived in this body before the girl was reborn? The sandwich slowly rose to his mouth. The man said that he was once again claiming to be a fake. Regarding this matter, the old lady was in this body from the very beginning, but she simply found out about it much later than necessary. Everything was so confusing that it was very difficult to understand everything right away, given that the interlocutor continued to eat at the same time. It turns out that they both originally had the same souls, but after separation they continued their lives separately. Time passed and the reunion finally happened. The owner of the body is none other than Grandma, so you can dispose of the body at your discretion. Stunned by such news, the girl still couldn't believe it, asking again, but she was told yes over and over again. They have one soul between them, but then it is unclear where Hami's memories disappeared, because after that morning when the beauty woke up in the mansion, it was impossible to remember anything else. Literally reading the thoughts of the person standing next to her, the fortune teller tries to incite, she probably doesn't remember her adventures at the age of 15, to which the lady only nods because it's true. She grew up a long time ago and vaguely remembers what is happening. Having caught the maid with the correct answer, the man assures that the reason is the same and that there is absolutely nothing strange. You just have to accept reality. Every minute the number of doubts grew. Moving closer to the young man, she continued to ask again if this was true and if he really thought that way. It was simply impossible not to remember even some small moment from your life. But the fortune teller quickly interrupted the girl again, clarifying the situation. Grandma's soul is much stronger, so in the end, it turned out this way, and nothing can be changed. It's incredible, simply extraordinary how big a child's soul had to be at 15 years old for everything to go well without any hiccups or bad things. Having completely finished the meal, getting up from his seat, the guy once again reminds him that there is no point in worrying. Very soon, a little time will pass, and the current image will become familiar. If you don't get too hung up on it, then this can be considered as another opportunity to return to your youth, which should not be missed. The body becomes young, and naturally the soul too. This cannot be changed, and it is worth accepting. All changes are always for the better or can be corrected so that everything works the way you want it. Long, graceful arms rise into the air to stretch. The fortune teller says that his mouth hurts like crazy because of the long conversation, but he doesn't regret anything. If the girl ever needs information again, all she has to do is contact her through the magician's castle and the answers will find themselves. Turning towards the exit, the magician smoothly moves to the final notes of the conversation. It was not worth delaying for a second longer, because with every minute the risk of getting caught increased and it became unsafe. Hami asked a question trying to find out who might fall into the clutches here, but there was no clear explanation. There was one terrible man here who could ruin the magician's years. Waving his hand and saying thank you for the food, the young man seems to evaporate. He is no longer here. Excitement enveloped the main character. Not that she cared, but without knowing the name or face, the chances of seeing each other again were exactly 0. Perhaps it would have been easier knowing exactly how to contact the person, but nothing can be returned. The eyes shone, remembering the good news. Now, it was much more important that the girl had to manage someone else's life and somehow live without any thoughts trying to realize all her past dreams and ideas. At first glance, it seemed like an overwhelming amount of work, but at the same time, it was more than possible. The young master and Hami are sitting on the sofa in the room where they usually spent most of their time. Training began again as if on schedule. The girl was trying to read some simple children's book about a mouse and a kitten. Words would sometimes read incorrectly, and Cassian would correct her. The story chosen was clearly not the best. The kitten eats the mouse immediately after the next conversation. Having read up to this point, the girl widened her eyes, trying to understand why she was being punished in the form of this book. Redhead forbids stopping and recommends just continuing to read, because the further you read, the more interesting the plot. The girl quietly agreed, deciding to continue reading in order to understand how the book would end. Grinning. Understanding the heroine's tenacity, the young man says that this story is about a mouse and how he fights for life inside a cat. In his thoughts, the redhead praises the young lady because she learned to read much faster than he expected. Diligently reading and trying to pronounce absolutely all the sounds, the girl has already finished reading the first paragraph, from which she manages to find out that this is just the first day of 7 days during which Luca is going to get out. The mouse begins his research walking around in the cat's stomach while the book is literally at Hami's eye level. The guy sat silently next to him looking at the person. Eyes slide over the girl. The young man notices her beautiful lips, with which she so ineptly tries to pronounce words correctly. The maid's uniform almost always flaunts on the girl, but this time everything seems completely different. A call from the right side of the sofa brings me back from my thoughts to reality. The dark-haired woman asks how to read a certain word, which in fact turns out to be a simple and easy word, death. Hastily thanks to her teacher, the girl just continues to read her entertaining story. The word fit perfectly into the required sentence, which couldn't help but rejoice. The only choice in the story to get out was not the best, and simply put, just weird. With every word she read, the girl's eyes widened more and more. She stopped turning to the gentleman, asking if this seemed strange to him. The book had a peculiar writing as incomprehensible as the content. This could not but bother the readers, and especially the girl who had never read anything before. Taking the book in his hands, the young man, without even thinking, confirmed his words, saying that the plot was indeed a little strange, which could not help but confuse him. The best solution would be to simply change the book to something else. The bewilderment makes it clear that the interlocutor was clearly not ready for such reactions, and in general was not ready to read such books with such a genre. The boy suggests another book, Apple and Peach Feud, but after a second he says that this is another cruel children's book. Cassian clearly expected to hear a refusal to read such works, but after asking about this, the answer turned out to be only a short, yes. There seemed to be no reasonable reason for this. The girl again immerses herself in reading The Peach and the Apple. Wasn't one of the best children's stories, but it certainly wasn't the worst. The conversation developed, and more details were learned from this story. The book talked about how the apple's provocations caused the peach's cheeks to turn even pinker. This moment carried absolutely no key meaning, but looking at the girl, the young owner for some reason was very embarrassed. Pink, peach-like cheeks, concentrated eyes showed how innocent the girl was, which could not help but attract attention. Wild excitement covered Cassian in a cold wave. The guy seemed to become even more nervous when he caught himself thinking about things in such a way. It was unclear and scary to understand my feelings and myself. Not finding any compelling excuse, the young man still stopped the girl, saying that this was enough for today. His hand fell on the book, as if trying to make him listen. The girl could only blink her eyes in response. The first excuse I came across seemed quite convincing. The boy started talking about Teacher Blake, saying that it was almost time for lesson and they should continue next time so that they have time to prepare for the lesson. His thoughts ran back and forth randomly because Cassian could not understand why he was so worried about this young lady. Bowing his head to the side, Hami cannot believe that all this just came from the lips of the boy himself, who, by the way, still could not close his mouth. According to him, studying is important, and today he must listen carefully to the teacher, which is the absolute truth which he has to agree with. The main character looked thoughtfully at the floor. She was sure that nothing of the kind had happened, and perhaps the young man simply suffered a sunstroke due to the rays, which was, of course, self-deception. Hurrying up and already approaching the door, the guy opens it slightly, as if inviting her, giving instructions, and saying that she should go already. It wasn't a good idea to stay too long, so it's understandable how this happened. Someone was clearly ahead of the couple because a moment later a teacher stood in the room rolling his eyes in surprise, realizing that perhaps he had not arrived quite on time. There was no apology, but that was still the case. The tone of the voice has changed to almost hostile in Cassian by stating that he still seems to have some time left, almost tries to send the teacher away even if it is not worth doing. Blake's patience was running out, crossing all lines. Straightening his back and preparing a whole tirade on this subject, the man says that at the last lesson it was said that it would be moved an hour earlier today. Obviously, the kid wasn't listening very carefully, and this couldn't help but disappoint. A slight wave of anger grips the hero. The fist slowly clenches and falls limply, unable to say or do anything. You can't help the problem with anger or force because everything really was discussed a long time ago, and there is no way out. The teacher, however, did not intend to be too verbose. A slight smile lit up his face because the impression crept into his head that the rumors were indeed true, which certainly could not help but rejoice. Bowing his head gallantly, Mr. Blake greets Hami, saying that he knew they would meet again. The return greeting was just as warm, although nothing else could have been expected from this girl. So to speak, notes of disgust are visible on the expression of the young Viscount's face. He's whining again about the incomprehensible greeting, which is clearly completely meaningless. Absolutely no regard for the rules of etiquette. Smiling even wider, the blonde reassures, saying that he just wanted to find out how true the rumors are. Maybe he shouldn't have said it, but there was no turning back. The children became very interested in finding out, so the very first question was what they were talking about. Without missing a beat, the man says that everyone is whispering about how the young master is teaching this lady to read. Quite convincing, except for the fact that there is also a rumor about how this mischievous man devoted all his attention to only one maid. However, it was too early to know such things. Pretending to put his hand to his cheek, the teacher started talking about how worried he was. The young man had no intention of learning, which means in this case he was powerless and was unlikely to be able to properly teach someone else. Anger begins to surface again, allowing it to take over. Cassian frowns, asking if he heard it, or if there really is dissatisfaction with the actions of the elite. His appearance did not bode well, but the maximum was crying. The conversation flowed smoothly into checking homework. Knowing that the young man has not read The History of the Founding of the State, he decides to joke, saying once again, "These are somewhat easy things, just the basics in his own and others' learning." The proposal was, to put it mildly, unexpected. Mr. Blake turned to Hami and said that she could attend their lesson today. The certainty that she would receive a huge amount of information haunted her. Opening her mouth in surprise, she only has enough strength to carefully ask again about whether this is true and whether she is really allowed. This practice was one of the best, and the offer was more than tempting. Even after a few minutes, it was still impossible to believe, so the girl simply sweetly pointed at herself, trying to believe everything that was happening, while the man smiled softly, assuring her that it was true. The next second, the blonde leans over the lady's ear and begins to say something in a conspiratorial tone. He really believes that if Hami is present in the lessons, Cassian's behavior will improve, which could be very beneficial. Continuing to tell all the good and bad things about the upcoming event, the girl caught herself thinking that this was one of the best ideas in recent times. There was no need to force or think for a long time. The beauty looked resolutely at the owner and, still turning to Black, confirmed her involvement. Both stood aside and smiled sweetly, as if nothing had happened. When, as a young man, he was clearly in shock, googling his eyes, he couldn't believe what he heard, because it was unimaginable for a girl to be present in class. This is a disaster. Taking a break from the interesting dialogue and turning towards the sofas, the lesson begins. Today, the topic was still the same, about the history of the state. We stopped at page 302, which means we can continue from there without any difficulty. Hami quickly settled down on the sofa next to the teacher, continuing to smile. She clasped her hands and seemed to forget about another person present in this room. Her words finally finished off, but she offered to go through and finally sit down as the teacher wanted. Horror and some kind of disappointment seized the mind of the young master. It really wasn't pleasant, and he wished he could say something about these two, but it didn't end well. The man takes out some unnecessary pieces of paper from his briefcase, on which most likely another strange topic is written. The girl moved even closer, talking about how she couldn't wait to find out what they would talk about today. Cassian froze and seemed on the verge of tears. Why everything turned so against him was unclear. It wasn't that something terrible had happened, but there was a feeling that this terrible thing would soon happen without any thought. The boy presses his hand to his body, looking down at the floor, but still noticing this couple who continued to say something without a clue about the meaning of any words. The situation, frankly speaking, was strange, but perhaps it was just the young man's imagination. He catches himself thinking that the whole problem is Hammy who is sitting here. He would really like to get the girl out of his head and admit that it was worth it a long time ago, because standing here in the middle of the room he felt completely defeated. Blake was indeed extremely likable. His manner of communication knew how to bribe everyone around him, which is why he didn't want to leave these two at all. The guy knew that a bunch of maids in the house had already fallen for the beauty of the teacher, who didn't even make any effort to do so. Another incident could not be allowed to happen. A quick and fuzzy thought flashed through my head like a whirlwind. I didn't want to believe it, but suddenly the maid also likes the professor, and there's no point in even trying to prevent anything since this happened a very long time ago. I didn't even want to think about such strange things. I just wanted to forget about everything and never return to it. Assuring himself that this can't happen and that it's all a lie, young Cassian shakes his head, trying to throw off the obsession that appeared out of nowhere. Sighing, the guy realizes that he has no choice. Just like that, no one will allow him to just stand and analyze the situation in silence. Therefore, you will have to walk on the spot and carefully listen to the information. Already sitting in a chair near the table, the boy decided that he would try not to say a word. He didn't want to attract attention, and on top of all this, the sight of these two was still extremely annoying for no reason at all. The teacher watches as the redhead takes a stack of papers and begins to read them. Still, he was right, and the restless behavior improved as soon as this young lady appeared here. Something definitely changed. Let's be clear about that. But everything was great. After some time, the teacher came up with an amazing idea. I wanted to arrange some kind of mini-quiz in which I would have to participate. Therefore, the question of the creator of the summary after the previous emperor was immediately processed and asked. Cassian was still in his thoughts and therefore obviously did not hear the answer right away, which was quite strange. Only after 10-15 seconds, the young man realized that he had been asked something and gave an answer. The professor says that this is correct, and the person sitting next to him smiles with a proud smile and shows signs of support, making it clear that she is still here and is glad because he is making great progress. In the aristocratic world, there is an order of things. Something goes away over time, but something comes, and this is inevitable because power changes, and after that, each new ruler wants to establish his own new laws. This is not a bad arrangement at all. Two young souls who clearly feel something for each other, expressing care and other feelings, seem to be just waiting for the moment when they would be allowed to fly out into the wild. When the time comes, there are things that rightfully return. One of these things is time itself, but this category also includes heat and cold, which in summer or winter spare absolutely no one. Two maids who are in the courtyard cleaning seem to be exhausted by the intense sun. Red faces and sweat make it clear that more than an hour has passed since they have been here, although they have no choice. One of the girls started talking about a magical cooling tool that was part of the imperial chamber. It would have been much better if a man had used it, or each of them could have done it. But that was not the case. Bowing her head and placing it in her hands, Hami remembered that there was definitely talk about magic. She managed to hear about this more than once, but all this turned out to be pure truth passed off as a lie. Trying not to think about how surprised she was by the magic, the girl remembers her past life. In that dimension, there were phones through which you could take photos, listen to music, and even make calls. There was no need to be so surprised by little things. At the moment, this heat and this weather are more important than some kind of magic. The young lady bent over, trying not to fall due to how much the sun was beating down on her head. When she woke up, she decided that this could not continue like this, and therefore she urgently needed to do something. It was impossible to hesitate, and it was worth coming up with some idea that would save everyone from such heat. A minute later, the beauty was already on the way to the kitchen, and a few minutes later, she was already standing right near the entrance. The first thing she wanted to say was about Su Jongwei. They should have cooked, and then it would have helped everyone around them. The cook who appeared just a second ago tried to repeat the name, but stumbling asked again what it was. The answer was not long in coming. It turned out that it was a drink made from cinnamon and ginger with boiled honey and sugar. It sounds so-so, but it promises to be amazing. The man stands in bewilderment. There were a lot of ingredients, and it seemed that this was not a drink at all but something else. Hami eagerly replied that it was, "So don't get hung up on the ingredients or other things, because this mixture helps withstand the heat much better than regular chilled water." The man without thinking twice agrees, moving around the kitchen towards the table on which all the necessary things could be laid out. The girl seemed impatient. The first things on the table are cinnamon and ginger. A very pleasant smell spreads throughout the room, but the idol is interrupted. The redhead says that he got everything he needs, but is the girl really sure that these are the right ingredients that she needs? Looking at the table, the girl says that everything is fine. Another highlight could be persimmons or pine nuts, but in general, everything will work out and work even in this form. Don't be nervous about this. Smiling, the interlocutor says that he is happy with this turn of events. Only Hami wanted to give literally everything she wanted. This person was so beautiful that it was impossible to regret or refuse her anything. Of course, the cook takes care of the cooking. This is his profession, and he was confident that he would do everything in the best possible way. The girl was ready to stay here and lead the process so that Sujongwa turned out exactly the way it should be. No more than 30 minutes passed before the process was finally completed. Making the final adjustments, the beauty says that now you need to leave the drink to simmer for another 1 hour and then cool and pour into bottles. After a while, the first bottle was legitimately ready and filled with an unusual smelling mixture, making it clear that the two young men had done an excellent job. The man almost fell asleep while walking. The main character immediately noticed this, saying how tired the man looked after everything that happened, although there was no particular reason. Rubbing his tired eyes with his hand, the interlocutor asks for forgiveness for accidentally dozing off when the situation did not require it. The only answer was that the girl did not pay such attention because the man was really very exhausted. Despite the fact that time passed unnoticed, what was more important was that now the finished drink could be tasted and appreciated. The dark-haired lady was already holding a small container with a poured portion in her hands. Slight distrust is shown on the face. This was quite logical since the cook had never tried anything like this before, so this mixture was still the discovery of the century. The resulting drink was more reminiscent of coffee, but the smell was very different from the usual one. Sujongwa is drunk not from cups, but from bowls. No one knows why it is customary to do it this way, but this cannot be changed, and no one complains about convenience. Raising the container to his lips, the man clearly did not expect anything special, but he tried it out of politeness, and due to the fact that this drink took more than 2 hours to prepare after all. After taking just a sip, the man looked up from the bowl trying to formulate his thoughts into clear words, but his attempts did not end in success even if he tried very hard. The taste was incredibly juicy. It was as if I found myself in a refreshing clearing and nothing else mattered. The girl, seeing the pleasure they were experiencing, carefully asked whether the cook was suitable for her potion. What was important was the assessment of the person from the outside and not the one who prepared it. The redhead still did not dare to say anything. Every time after one word he stammered or stopped saying that it was extremely good. However, the dark-haired woman still persisted in asking again. Finally, giving free rein to his feelings, a stream of words poured out of his mouth. It really was incredibly delicious, and no one denied it. No one had ever tasted such deliciousness, because the combination of notes of ginger and honey really suited the other ingredients very well. I still couldn't wrap my head around how this happened. The cooking process did not look complicated, and the taste was achieved with such simple ingredients. Usually, some problems still arise as soon as you are about to start cooking, but not this time. He quickly changes his train of thought. The cook says that this won't work. You can't give this to the maids because it's worth treating the Viscount too. Absolutely everyone should try this, and therefore today you will need to present this drink for dinner. By saying that there is no need for gratitude, the girl does not say that there are several other equally important elements of preparation that complete the process. Now that the drink is already cold, you should pour it into glass bottles and leave it in the shade. If everything is done right, then the maids suffering from thirst and heat will be able to look under the tree and take the bottle if necessary." The answer was not long in coming, and the redhead nodded, agreeing, promising to give some to the rest of the workers. The heat really killed all strength and desire to do anything. Because of this, everyone looks powerless, and therefore everyone will definitely like the drug. You don't have to be a fortune teller to be confident in your actions. The man takes all the bottles in his arms, trying carefully not to drop a single copy. The main character standing behind him only says that Sujongwoo can be prepared more than once so you can safely dispose of the drinks. Thoughtfulness descended on the beauty's mind. Now it seemed to her that this time she should prepare Sikyo rather than Sujongwan. There were just a whole bunch of ideas. It was definitely worth choosing at least one of them for yourself. The cook, who already seemed to want to leave, turned his head towards the girl, asking what it was. Now it was interesting to find out absolutely all the details. A sunny hot day, and the inhabitants of the castle, who are now constantly discussing Sikyo and Sujongwa people, called them day and night tea, to make it easier to remember the names and, if necessary, ask for more. The blonde agrees with her interlocutor. All the people in this house have long tried these wonderful drinks. There was not a single person who did not know what was happening and what kind of drugs they were. There were rumors that even Mrs. Piella came to try these two teas. The woman apparently also really liked it, and therefore later the Viscount himself again thanked Hami for the work done and for her help. There is very little time left before the lesson. The teacher talks to the girl about something and then hands her a beautiful black book. It turns out that it was gratitude for the drinks they gave him last time. It turned out that these wonderful potions were prepared by none other than the main character. According to Blake, he read this book when he was studying at the academy, which means he was sure that the young woman would like it. The girl didn't know how to accept gifts, so she started talking about how she shouldn't have given anything. However, it was just a sign of gratitude and attention. The girl had to have the book because The Red Desert is a classic masterpiece, and no one has the right to argue with that. The description truly sounded wonderful. The story told about a chase that happens outside the state. The professor notes that the text may be similar to a martial arts textbook. A smile spreads across the heroine's face because what she gave is not as significant as this. Wondering how modest the girl is, the teacher notices that she is an even more skilled craftswoman than rumors circulate about her. The confrontation continues because the beauty believes that she should thank the young man for enjoying the drink. Putting his hand to his chest, Blake sweetly talks about how glad he is that the young master has someone like Hami by his side. She, in turn, says approximately the same thing, because without a good teacher nearby, everything would be different. Listening to all this was not the best idea for the young owner. The face expressed only dull colors and emotions. Before the girl showed up at the lesson, no tricks helped improve the atmosphere, even if every possible effort was made to do so. Thoughtfully putting his finger to his chin, the guy tries to understand what is so special about this professor. The roaring laughter of his interlocutor, like a flower, blooms right at the ends of the earth. She had never laughed so much with him, but soon this whole world would turn into a jungle with flowers. A thought came to mind. Perhaps the beauty just likes smart and handsome men. The teacher could not help but fit this description, so there was no doubt, not even a little. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I couldn't believe it. Was it true or not? Is Hami really the same as the other maids who all like Mr. Blake? This thought hurt the mind, making it possible to feel disappointment or even start crying. If you think like that, then the maid is still very young. She is only 15 years old, which means in the eyes of the blonde, she looks like a small child, and this cannot be changed because age is not subject to control. Is this really unrequited love? Because the girl is unrequitedly in love with this man. You should forget about it, otherwise, everything will only get worse. There was no better solution than jumping up from my seat after 10 minutes of silence and shouting that the guy also has a lot of books. He doesn't really need all of them, even throw them away, so there is an opportunity to give them all away. Confusion conveys unanswered words that one might have wanted to ask, but did not want to interrupt the young man. It was clear that he was completely out of mood, which was not a very good sign. According to the redhead, it will definitely be better. All unnecessary books can be given to Hami, who would definitely enjoy reading them from morning to night. Heading out, the boy asked to wait at least 15 minutes until he brought everything he needed. Still not saying a word, the two stood and looked at the door following the departing gentleman. No one understood what had just happened or why this performance had been staged, but it was immediately clear that he was not himself. Literally. A second later, the blonde stopped thinking about the boy and, turning his head towards the young lady, continued the conversation. His wife really enjoyed it and was super excited to try the drinks that really helped her. Hami did not expect such a turn, but she began to smile more than ever, because the more people she managed to please, the happier she had to be. My wife also offered to give me a book, and it was very nice of her. The girl was glad that she managed to please Mrs. Blake, so the best option was to ask the man to convey his thanks to her as soon as he returned home. Cassian already seemed ready to fall due to the sheer number of books. 4 pieces were already in his hands. But it was not enough for him, and therefore, grabbing at everything possible, he clearly and confidently continued to build a tower of things that tried to cover his face. It was impossible not to look at those two who were still chatting about something. The professor mentioned that his betrothed has very severe toxicosis, and therefore it is not possible to eat anything. However, Xu Zhongwan settled in perfectly, without any visible problems. Putting her hand to her cheek expressing concern, the girl is glad that this happened, but then says that toxicosis is a rather complicated thing. Ginger is good, but because of the cinnamon you shouldn't drink a lot of the drink, otherwise everything may not be as you would like. The girl promises that from now on she will prepare drinks more often, so that the man can share them with his wife. The gratitude sounded rather hesitant, because it was indeed very kind, but I didn't want to cause too much inconvenience. The hand falls on the shoulder of the interlocutor, who looks completely confused. The main character in turn says that everything is fine because it's so hard for pregnant women. She knows everything about the birth of a child, and therefore understands how difficult it is when there is not knowing what to do. Literally insisting, the girl says that it will not be difficult for her to take care of his wife, and the least she can do is prepare drinks for consumption at least several times a week. There were a lot of ideas, and one of them was to create some clothes for the child. Today, the girl had plenty of time after class and completing all her duties, so this was a chance to do something interesting. The city of Divine Heel was only a kilometer from the mansion. The road did not take much time, allowing you to walk around if you leave in the morning. The main character, dressed in a beautiful black dress, stood in the middle of the road, not quite understanding where the reason she came here was. She needed a store with fabrics which she had long since run out of, which she should buy in reserve. Walking past other shops and beautiful green bushes, Hami was still trying to figure out where this shop should be. There was no way out since there was no point in returning without fabrics. Otherwise, there would be no material to make children's clothing. Attention was drawn to something flying from above. It's not a very heavy thing, but the girl didn't think that she would be able to see something like that in the city, or even in this world. A beautiful paper airplane fell into the hands of a girl. He almost crashed into a bush, but he had to jump in order to catch him. Perhaps it was worth turning it back on because these are probably some children who have nothing to do, so they play. Her eyes fell on the find, and the girl suddenly noticed that the thing was not empty. On the paper from which the toy was rolled up, there was something written in ink, as if intended for someone. His eyes quickly ran over the lines of paper which he had to unfold to get a full readable sheet with the message. It seemed that it was all written by some magician. The man wrote that he managed to read all the draft principles of magic sent last time, but if we talk about conclusions, nothing could be learned from it. Degenerates who made a mistake don't even deserve food. The heroine does not understand what all this means. It looks like it would be worth expanding the stages again to 12 instead of 8 to preserve the peaceful part of the magic, but that doesn't look too convincing. The rhombride theory was used, which was completely unfamiliar to the girl. Everything written on the sheet looks more like a kind of code. The sender asked not to engage in useless activities, because this too affects the integrity of the soul and the future that the recipient was able to see. It was about spying on someone without using magic or anything else unnecessary. it was immediately clear that the person who wrote this was feeling very angry. Attention is drawn to a small inscription located at the very bottom immediately after the text, "Alfie" is the sender's name. The strange encryption was created for other purposes, but these purposes were not easily accessible. It was not immediately clear why this was all and to whom it was sent, but the heroine noticed that the letter was clearly not intended for her. She had nothing to do with magic and had never seen any drafts. The first step was to roll the paper again. It should look like an airplane again, exactly the same as it was before it fell into Hami's hands. The beautiful toy was again in the hands of the main character. It seemed like no one had ever taken it apart. The girl was pleased with her work. Raising his hand, the airplane took off. Soaring into the air, the toy flew in the other direction even without any wind force. Still, there was something very strange about what happened. The beauty's eyes lit up with a lively sparkle. There are still things in the world that can surprise, but at the same time, do not require too much energy. Just a piece of paper that seems too beautiful. After just 10 minutes of searching, the beauty found herself right in front of dark wooden doors. The comic book store was successfully found, which meant success had been achieved. One of Hami's most important skills is to quickly complete tasks. The girl managed to order fabric for new clothes for the teacher's baby. Then it was time to go get some goodies at the request of her colleagues. Attention was drawn to a store located right a meter from the place the young lady had just visited. The head turned, slowly noticing something interesting to itself. A small, but such a wonderful figurine of a white tiger stands alone in the display case. Cassian said that he liked tigers, but even without words, one could understand this since he always asked to do all possible embroideries with this particular animal. The decision has been made. The young man, not understanding what just happened, stares at the figurine of the animal in his hands. This is quite nice, and I would like to say even more words, but the only thing I have the ability to do is, thank you. Looking up at the person standing next to him, the guy still can't figure out why she did it. Even a small gift was more like a gesture of attention, and this could not but please. Hiding his eyes embarrassed, the young man asked if it was really bought for him because he needed confirmation again, even if it was already obvious because the girl was not going to take the figurine back. Straightening his hair, Hami, a little confused, asks if he likes everything because such questions lead to a completely different idea. It's normal for people to not like gifts, but she didn't want that to happen. The guy protested, saying that he would never say such a thing. He really liked the gift. In gratitude for the literacy lessons and the books he gave after the girl saw this tiger, she immediately remembered Cassian and wanted to thank him. Bowing his head once again, looking at the cute figure, the boy did not count on the gift because he believed that he had not done anything like that, and even if he had, it still would not have changed his opinion much. Hami, with eyes like two large plates, looked at her interlocutor like a puppy trying to figure out his exact point of view. It was quite difficult, but nothing was impossible. Cassian's face scrunched up and his eyes squeezed shut. He seemed to be in great pain. Although this was not true, the concerned person began to ask what happened and why he was so upset. Changing his facial expression in order not to frighten the maid, the red-haired man, still unable to look straight, said words of gratitude. And this is the pure truth, because he is immensely happy. Hami was thinking about something. If she had known earlier that he would like it so much, she would have thought about it a long time ago, immediately after the first lesson. She wasn't sure what she could give as a gift, but if she wanted, she could always find something suitable. Ignoring the obvious confusion of his interlocutor, the young Viscount decided to move on to more important matters. It was worth deciding where to place the gift. Some of the tables where lessons were usually held are definitely not suitable. One day the figurine may be accidentally pushed to the floor, and then the guy will never forgive himself for this. The eyes catch on the second table, which also does not fit, just like all the furniture in the room. Suffering from youthful maximalism, the young man suddenly says that perhaps one of the best ideas is to change the old interior for a new one, and then everything will immediately become much easier for everyone. The boy really liked the tiger very much, and it was worth giving gifts. The response was simply impeccable. Distracted from contemplating such a cute picture, the girl noticed that the lesson was about to start soon, and therefore they should hurry up. Leaving the guy completely alone in the room so that he can finally figure out where to place his gift, Hami opens the doors to the corridor and hurriedly leaves. She has one thing that cannot be postponed. While in her room, the maid thinks whether these things are enough or whether she should wait a few more days, and during this time make even more copies. The question seems almost impossible to solve. Beautiful children's clothes lie on the bed. Multicolored colors are very captivating, making it clear that the baby will become the most fashionable after birth. The bunny toy looks even more wonderful than all the other clothes. All I had to do was find a bag to pack this whole heap, and here's the joy. It was right at hand without taking time to search. The accessories lie inside, and deft hands tie a tight knot for safe transportation. The only negative is that the wrapped gift was too heavy. Even without lifting anything, the girl already understands that it will be quite difficult to bring it to the room she needs almost halfway across the hall. But she cannot give up. The door to the office opens quietly. Voices are heard from the room discussing some new book or assignment for the next lesson. It seems that the lesson is in full swing, but it is already coming to an end. The professor, holding a textbook in his hands, talks about a state that took 5 years for the previous ruler to declare the independence of the first academy and palace. The red-haired man listened carefully and followed the text in the book. Both people, noticing the maid standing, ask her to come in and close the door. I think she should go and sit down so that after class she can discuss the material. The girl is still standing in the middle of the room, rooted to the spot. There are 2 options for events in my head. Each of them is not bad, but still the option in which you should wait until the end of the lesson and only then give a gift sounds much better. Walking further and sitting down, Hami continued to listen to the theme of the story. She was always interested in reading, but it was even more interesting to listen to Professor Blake's stories. He clearly had talent. As it turned out, high-status aristocrats did not want the division of influence and therefore protested. For future generations, the decision turned out to be correct, and it was appreciated. According to the teacher, if not for the past ruler, the chain of transmission of magic traditions that goes from generation to generation could have been interrupted, and that would have been the end of it. Without knowing this man, Hami for some reason was sure that the past ruler was a very outstanding person. On the divine land where they live, only a few people possess life-giving enchanting magic. Only a few people can use this to their advantage, but on the other hand, the fields of magic are varied. Magic is a matter that cannot be touched but can be obtained. There are over 500 species, and unfortunately, not all of them are as safe as we would like. There are not so many magicians left, and over time, a crisis will form in rare areas of magic. This could have led to extinction. However, fortunately, the past ruler decided to gather all the magicians in one place to keep records, and so that the magicians could share knowledge with each other. The Castle of Magicians is the place that still functions today. Today, the ideology has changed, but the construction still carries great significance. Any nose of any curious fortune teller can reach the magicians, but not everyone is so lucky. The girl recalls how a young man who came to buy groceries told her to contact him through the palace if anything happened. Surely this is not one of those places that can be found guided by one interest, which means that you can safely forget about it. Finishing his fascinating story, the blonde turns to the young master, talking about his manners. They have become much better, which makes the task easier and makes the professor happy. Closing his eyes and turning his head away, Cassian snorts, saying that they have always been like this, but that is not true. The boy showed erudition, and this improved the passage of the material, making the process much easier. Today, the lesson finished earlier than usual, expecting to hear anything, but definitely not this. The young man widened his eyes. This was to his advantage, but it was still not clear what had such an impact on the situation, which suddenly changed so dramatically in the other direction. The girl is filled with pride in Cassian. She believes that her baby is the best, and no one can change that. He manages to do what he is capable of, even if it takes a lot of effort. But the result is simply amazing. Deciding not to show how worried he was and not to react even worse than before, the young man relaxed. He was about to leave too, and the fact that they finished early would help a lot in this case. Smiling, the professor asks if he was overworked. This was clearly not sarcasm, but just ordinary concern, so the boy decides to show his capabilities. He didn't overwork himself. But on the contrary, he realized that everything was too easy, that he even got bored. The blonde decided not to comment on what was happening, and simply said that he would take note. Starting from the next lesson, the teacher will try to dismiss the young Viscount early, because in a few days they will begin studying the international situation, which will take much longer. The best suggestion is that you can mark this lesson because it was quite successful and easy. Turning his head towards the maid sitting next to him, Blake asks her opinion on this. The girl happily agrees. Why not celebrate such an event if there is good company and the mood to do something? The next moment, Hami remembers things and says that she has prepared the necessary clothes as well as a new portion of the drink. It was quite nice of her, and so the professor smiles a little shyly and thanks his friend. The red-haired one hearing these conversations was rather taken aback. He didn't understand what the joke was and why they communicated so kindly after the girl gave some things to the teacher. Mr. Blake still didn't want to stop. Like last time, he says that he cannot accept such a gift without something in return. The only question is, what exactly the heroine would like to receive. The brunette remembers the book again. The token of gratitude that was given to her a few days ago is quite enough for her. It is impossible to forget this or want to get something different. Holding the package in his lap, the man still resists, but this time he offers to invite her home for dinner. According to him, for several weeks now, he would like to treat Hami to something as a sign of gratitude. This could not but please me. The young Viscount's face fell in horror. Food and an invitation to your home sounded quite strange. It no longer felt like a friendly relationship, even if they still considered themselves friends despite the age difference. In simple words, it was an invitation to a date. The young man could not believe how this happened, because just recently it seemed that nothing could happen between them. But now everything has changed dramatically. The smiles were proof of this. Deciding to stop all this and destroy the idle Cassian protests. The word impossible sounded like a bolt from the blue. Those in the room were distracted from the conversation and asked again, trying to understand what it all meant. Frowning, the young man indicates his intentions. Hami is a servant of the Winston family. Therefore, she cannot do anything without consent. My consent. Discontent can be heard in every note and word of his voice and remarks. Nothing surprising. The interlocutors are still sitting in complete silence, unable to say anything. It's easier to give the young man what he wants and let him finish his angry tirade. If the girl goes, then the young master will go with her, and this is no longer discussed. A smile of humility appears on Mr. Blake's good-natured face. He agrees to the terms, saying that Cassian is allowed to come to dinner too. Arriving at the professor's house, he will definitely be able to meet the family. Frowning, the young master is not enthusiastic about the idea of meeting his family. There is only enough strength to ask again if it will be true. There is no other way out, since the man initially invited Hami to introduce him to his family, and as a result, refusal will not be accepted. Everyone wants to go to dinner and will be ready to do what they are told. Doubt creeps into the boy's little head. Blake said that this is his family, which means these are his parents. It sounds quite strange because they usually meet their relatives only on one occasion. Cold horror grips everything inside. This is impossible, but what if in the future, Hami becomes a daughter-in-law, and then everything is over, even though she is still very young? The blonde had long since switched back to his interlocutor, asking about the exact date. The best solution was to see you tomorrow at lunch, agreeing to such conditions. The beauty nods her head, saying goodbye in the same way as Cassian. A carriage from the Winston estate with a beautiful horse rides down the street. The moment when the boy finds out the whole truth and will kick the blanket even closer, predetermining everything that will happen. A sad look looks out the window somewhere. He asked for this dinner himself, but thinking about everything that was happening, he clearly didn't want anything bad to happen. The head turns towards the person sitting opposite. A beautiful brunette is also looking out the window. I don't think there's anything too interesting there, but perhaps she's just awkward being alone with the young master without having anything to talk about. A strange thought suddenly came to mind. Looking at the heroine for more than 1 minute, the young Viscount realized that she was still in the same dress. The next question is addressed to Hami because he is really interested in knowing why she wears all the same clothes. Last weekend when the girl ran errands, she wore the same outfit. It wasn't something unacceptable, but it couldn't help but bother someone who cared. The window lost all attractiveness, and the young lady turned her gaze to the man sitting opposite. She sincerely didn't understand what the problem was, so she asked what was wrong. She can wear whatever she wants whenever she wants. Not knowing what to say, the young man told the lady to just forget about this conversation. This was the best decision, but only for the time being. Come to think of it, Cassian had never seen Hami in any other attire. Always just a maid uniform or this dress. All the other maids are probably exactly the same, but they at least have a few changes of outfits for going out. He didn't want to start this conversation, not knowing at all how it could all end, but it was too late to retreat. The suggestion was to buy some clothes after dinner. The girl asked in surprise why she needed this. The argument sounded quite convincing. The girl should have at least one changeable outfit, or even better, 5 outfits. This is one of the most necessary, but if she needs anything else, don't be shy. They can always go and buy something together. The beauty still didn't know how this world worked, so she assumed that wearing only maid's clothes was not worth it. Thinking over all the pros and cons, the maid agreed, remembering in time that she had recently seen a clothing store in Kabluchka. All this was not to spend as little time as possible with the teacher. However, it could work and be useful in 2 cases. The plan was this: to arrive and immediately move on. Of course, no one is going to stick with him. But Cassian was pleased to know that Blake would not have time to please Hami even more. Changing his facial expression in order not to frighten the maid, the red-haired man, still unable to look straight, said words of gratitude. And this is the pure truth, because he is immensely happy. Hami was thinking about something. If she had known earlier that he would like it so much, she would have thought about it a long time ago, immediately after the first lesson. She wasn't sure what she could give as a gift, but if she wanted, she could always find something suitable. Ignoring the obvious confusion of his interlocutor, the young Viscount decided to move on to more important matters. It was worth deciding where to place the gift. Some of the tables where lessons were usually held are definitely not suitable. One day the figurine may be accidentally pushed to the floor, and then the guy will never forgive himself for this. The eyes catch on the second table, which also does not fit, just like all the furniture in the room. Suffering from youthful maximalism, the young man suddenly says that perhaps one of the best ideas is to change the old interior for a new one, and then everything will immediately become much easier for everyone. The boy really liked the tiger very much, and it was worth giving gifts. The response was simply impeccable. Distracted from contemplating such a cute picture, the girl noticed that the lesson was about to start soon, and therefore they should hurry up. Leaving the guy completely alone in the room so that he can finally figure out where to place his gift, Hami opens the doors to the corridor and hurriedly leaves. She has one thing that cannot be postponed. While in her room, the maid thinks whether these things are enough or whether she should wait a few more days, and during this time make even more copies. The question seems almost impossible to solve. Beautiful children's clothes lie on the bed. Multicolored colors are very captivating, making it clear that the baby will become the most fashionable after birth. The bunny toy looks even more wonderful than all the other clothes. All I had to do was find a bag to pack this whole heap, and here's the joy. It was right at hand without taking time to search. The accessories lie inside, and deft hands tie a tight knot for safe transportation. The only negative is that the wrapped gift was too heavy. Even without lifting anything, the girl already understands that it will be quite difficult to bring it to the room she needs almost halfway across the hall. But she cannot give up. The door to the office opens quietly. Voices are heard from the room discussing some new book or assignment for the next lesson. It seems that the lesson is in full swing, but it is already coming to an end. The professor, holding a textbook in his hands, talks about a state that took 5 years for the previous ruler to declare the independence of the first academy and palace. The red-haired man listened carefully and followed the text in the book. Both people, noticing the maid standing, ask her to come in and close the door. I think she should go and sit down so that after class she can discuss the material. The girl is still standing in the middle of the room, rooted to the spot. There are 2 options for events in my head. Each of them is not bad, but still the option in which you should wait until the end of the lesson and only then give a gift sounds much better. Walking further and sitting down, Hami continued to listen to the theme of the story. She was always interested in reading, but it was even more interesting to listen to Professor Blake's stories. He clearly had talent. As it turned out, high-status aristocrats did not want the division of influence and therefore protested. For future generations, the decision turned out to be correct, and it was appreciated. According to the teacher, if not for the past ruler, the chain of transmission of magic traditions that goes from generation to generation could have been interrupted, and that would have been the end of it. Without knowing this man, Hami for some reason was sure that the past ruler was a very outstanding person. On the divine land where they live, only a few people possess life-giving enchanting magic. Only a few people can use this to their advantage, but on the other hand, the fields of magic are varied. Magic is a matter that cannot be touched but can be obtained. There are over 500 species, and unfortunately, not all of them are as safe as we would like. There are not so many magicians left, and over time, a crisis will form in rare areas of magic. This could have led to extinction. However, fortunately, the past ruler decided to gather all the magicians in one place to keep records, and so that the magicians could share knowledge with each other. The Castle of Magicians is the place that still functions today. Today, the ideology has changed, but the construction still carries great significance. Any nose of any curious fortune teller can reach the magicians, but not everyone is so lucky. The girl recalls how a young man who came to buy groceries told her to contact him through the palace if anything happened. Surely this is not one of those places that can be found guided by one interest, which means that you can safely forget about it. Finishing his fascinating story, the blonde turns to the young master talking about his manners. They have become much better, which makes the task easier and makes the professor happy. Closing his eyes and turning his head away, Cassian snorts, saying that they have always been like this, but that is not true. The boy showed erudition, and this improved the passage of the material, making the process much easier. Today, the lesson finished earlier than usual, expecting to hear anything, but definitely not this. The young man widened his eyes. This was to his advantage, but it was still not clear what had such an impact on the situation, which suddenly changed so dramatically in the other direction. The girl is filled with pride in Cassian. She believes that her baby is the best, and no one can change that. He manages to do what he is capable of, even if it takes a lot of effort. But the result is simply amazing. Deciding not to show how worried he was and not to react even worse than before, the young man relaxed. He was about to leave too, and the fact that they finished early would help a lot in this case. Smiling, the professor asks if he was overworked. This was clearly not sarcasm, but just ordinary concern, so the boy decides to show his capabilities. He didn't overwork himself, but on the contrary, he realized that everything was too easy, that he even got bored. The blonde decided not to comment on what was happening, and simply said that he would take note. Starting from the next lesson, the teacher will try to dismiss the young Viscount early, because in a few days they will begin studying the international situation, which will take much longer. The best suggestion is that you can mark this lesson because it was quite successful and easy. Turning his head towards the maid sitting next to him, Blake asks her opinion on this. The girl happily agrees. Why not celebrate such an event if there is good company and the mood to do something? The next moment, Hami remembers things and says that she has prepared the necessary clothes as well as a new portion of the drink. It was quite nice of her, and so the professor smiles a little shyly and thanks his friend. The red-haired one hearing these conversations was rather taken aback. He didn't understand what the joke was and why they communicated so kindly after the girl gave some things to the teacher. Mr. Blake still didn't want to stop. Like last time, he says that he cannot accept such a gift without something in return. The only question is, what exactly the heroine would like to receive. The brunette remembers the book again. The token of gratitude that was given to her a few days ago is quite enough for her. It is impossible to forget this or want to get something different. Holding the package in his lap, the man still resists, but this time he offers to invite her home for dinner. According to him, for several weeks now, he would like to treat Hami to something as a sign of gratitude. This could not but please me. The young Viscount's face fell in horror. Food and an invitation to your home sounded quite strange. It no longer felt like a friendly relationship, even if they still considered themselves friends despite the age difference. In simple words, it was an invitation to a date. The young man could not believe how this happened, because just recently it seemed that nothing could happen between them. But now everything has changed dramatically. The smiles were proof of this, deciding to stop all this and destroy the idle Cassian protests. The word impossible sounded like a bolt from the blue. Those in the room were distracted from the conversation and asked again, trying to understand what it all meant. Frowning, the young man indicates his intentions. Hami is a servant of the Winston family. Therefore, she cannot do anything without consent. My consent. Discontent can be heard in every note and word of his voice and remarks. Nothing surprising. The interlocutors are still sitting in complete silence, unable to say anything. It's easier to give the young man what he wants and let him finish his angry tirade. If the girl goes, then the young master will go with her, and this is no longer discussed. A smile of humility appears on Mr. Blake's good-natured face. He agrees to the terms, saying that Cassian is allowed to come to dinner too. Arriving at the professor's house, he will definitely be able to meet the family. Frowning, the young master is not enthusiastic about the idea of meeting his family. There is only enough strength to ask again if it will be true. There is no other way out, since the man initially invited Hami to introduce him to his family, and as a result, refusal will not be accepted. Everyone wants to go to dinner and will be ready to do what they are told. Doubt creeps into the boy's little head. Blake said that this is his family, which means these are his parents. It sounds quite strange because they usually meet their relatives only on one occasion. Cold horror grips everything inside. This is impossible, but what if in the future, Hami becomes a daughter-in-law, and then everything is over, even though she is still very young? The blonde had long since switched back to his interlocutor, asking about the exact date. The best solution was to see you tomorrow at lunch, agreeing to such conditions. The beauty nods her head, saying goodbye in the same way as Cassian. A carriage from the Winston estate with a beautiful horse rides down the street. The moment when the boy finds out the whole truth and will kick the blanket even closer, predetermining everything that will happen. A sad look looks out the window somewhere. He asked for this dinner himself, but thinking about everything that was happening, he clearly didn't want anything bad to happen. The head turns towards the person sitting opposite. A beautiful brunette is also looking out the window. I don't think there's anything too interesting there, but perhaps she's just awkward being alone with the young master without having anything to talk about. A strange thought suddenly came to mind. Looking at the heroine for more than 1 minute, the young Viscount realized that she was still in the same dress. The next question is addressed to Hami because he is really interested in knowing why she wears all the same clothes. Last weekend when the girl ran errands, she wore the same outfit. It wasn't something unacceptable, but it couldn't help but bother someone who cared. The window lost all attractiveness, and the young lady turned her gaze to the man sitting opposite. She sincerely didn't understand what the problem was, so she asked what was wrong. She can wear whatever she wants whenever she wants. Not knowing what to say, the young man told the lady to just forget about this conversation. This was the best decision, but only for the time being. Come to think of it, Cassian had never seen Hami in any other attire. Always just a maid uniform or this dress. All the other maids are probably exactly the same, but they at least have a few changes of outfits for going out. He didn't want to start this conversation, not knowing at all how it could all end, but it was too late to retreat. The suggestion was to buy some clothes after dinner. The girl asked in surprise why she needed this. The argument sounded quite convincing. The girl should have at least one changeable outfit, or even better, 5 outfits. This is one of the most necessary, but if she needs anything else, don't be shy. They can always go and buy something together. The beauty still didn't know how this world worked, so she assumed that wearing only maid's clothes was not worth it. Thinking over all the pros and cons, the maid agreed, remembering in time that she had recently seen a clothing store in Kabluchka. All this was not to spend as little time as possible with the teacher. However, it could work and be useful in 2 cases. The plan was this: to arrive and immediately move on. Of course, no one is going to stick with him. But Cassian was pleased to know that Blake would not have time to please Hami even more.